night is still young here in California, and it's 7:30 p.m. The polls in the state are closing in just half an hour. Stay with us as we bring you the latest election results.
Students are gathering in Wallace-Annenberg Hall as results begin to trickle in.
And we have reporter teams across California for Democrats and for the Los Angeles GOP. We'll take you to both parties live to see how the races are shaping up and get reactions from supporters. Welcome to a very special night on Annenberg TV News. It's election night, and results are coming in across the country. Polls in dozens of states are now closed, and they're about to close here in California. Good evening. I'm Malcolm Caminero.
And I'm Sophie Sullivan. We're following key races across the nation and here in LA. The results will determine the next president of the United States, although we may not know who that is tonight.
We'll be watching closely as votes are counted. I'm Payton May, and I'll be following major races in states across the country.
And I'm Stephen Noble. I'll be taking a look at hot button issues here in the Golden State, including the Senate race, Proposition 32, and the race for LA District Attorney.
Tonight, Payton May is our national correspondent, and she was part of a cohort of Annenberg students who traveled to swing states to cover voter sentiment. Now, Payton, you went to Arizona, and we'll touch more on that later, but you've been following races across the nation.
That's right, Malcolm. Races are heating up tonight, so let's take a look at what's coming in. It's a little after 7:30 Pacific time here, and voting centers have closed across the eastern United States. We'll be bringing you live updates from the Associated Press, whose decision team will be reporting votes throughout the night. As a reminder, either candidate will need to reach 270 electoral votes in order to secure the presidency of the United States. Let's take a look at the electoral map right now to see where they currently stand. Polls have been closed in some states for over 4 hours now, and the Associated Press has already called a number of them. As we can see from the map, former President Donald Trump has won 198 electoral votes, while Vice President Kamala Harris has won 112. Notably, the states of Florida and Texas have been called for Donald Trump, giving him a significant number of votes contributing to that 198. The Democratic stronghold states of New York, Illinois, along with much of the East Coast, has been called for Kamala Harris.
Our California correspondent Stephen Noble has been following along with the important races all across the Golden State. Stephen, can you break down this ballot for us?
Yeah, well, Sophie, there's a slew of competitive races here in California, but let's start by taking a look at the House of Representatives. I want to start with the big picture of what's going on here. In this election, the Republican Party holds 220 seats to the Democrats' 212 seats. There are 3 vacancies. Tonight, the Democrats need to gain a net of 6 districts to flip the House of Representatives into a blue majority. Throughout our show, we will bring you updates on 5 California swing districts, District 13, 22, 27, 41, and California's 45th congressional district. Each of these districts feature a Republican incumbent, but they have the potential to go blue tonight. We're also going to keep an eye on the race for the Senate in California. Democrat Adam Schiff faces Republican Steve Garvey. Going into tonight, Schiff is ahead in the polls by over 22 points. That's according to the Real Clear Politics poll average. We will continue to monitor this election for you as votes are processed. Polls are not yet closed in California. Now, let's shift gears here. I want to highlight some local elections happening in LA. George Gascon is running for re-election against Nathan Hochman for LA District Attorney. Gascon recently made major headlines with his support of the Menendez brothers released from prison. In early October, the LA Times conducted a poll that showed George Gascon trailing by 30 points. Their most recent polls from just last week shows that the incumbent Gascon has cut slightly into Hochman's lead, now trailing by 25 points going into tonight. Finally, the last local election we're going to highlight on tonight's ballot, LA City Council District 14 is up for grabs as Kevin De Leon runs for his second term against Jezebel Jurado. De Leon has been serving this district since 2020, but in 2022, he faced continuous calls to resign over racist remarks that were caught on tape. Jurado won the 8-candidate primary election in March by just 398 votes, so we're going to continue to keep an eye on this election for you.
Thank you, Stephen. Now we're going to touch a little bit on the Senate race between Schiff and Garvey. Garvey being a former baseball player who frankly didn't do that much campaigning throughout this entire process, and Schiff, who comes in with nearly 2 decades of experience in office. How do you see this race shaping up for tonight?
Well, look, with the recent Dodgers win, you might think, yeah, Garvey's going to win this race. Everyone's loving the Dodgers. He's a former Dodgers player. This is so exciting. He has that celebrity pull. But what's important is the context of how he got here. He got here really because Adam Schiff, the Democrat on the ballot, wanted him here. Schiff had a multi-million-dollar ad blitz to really try to center himself against Garvey in this election, cutting out former other Democrat Katie Porter in that primary. So that's why Garvey's here tonight. It's not from necessarily his own campaign efforts, but from Adam Schiff's efforts instead.
That's a great point. And now we'll turn to our live teams for the night as we have reporters Marco Ramirez and Layla Albert at Donald Trump's watch party in Long Beach. Marco, Leia, how's it going out there?
Yeah, we are live here in Long Beach at a Roscoe's Chicken and Waffle where a Trump watch party is taking place, as you can see right here behind me. It is getting quite packed. People are filing in minute by minute. They are adding chairs right here behind us because that's how many people are showing up. The place is extremely decorated. It's becoming a Red Sea here. And today joining me is
Leia Albert. And just like Marco said, the crowd is getting bigger by the minute, and it is a very patriotic crowd. They started off with a prayer, and then the Pledge of Allegiance, and then the national anthem, where almost everyone in this room was singing along. And just with that, the decor in this room is also very patriotic. There are red, white, and blue star balloons in the air, and many life-size Trump blow-ups. And now back to the studio.
We really appreciate it.
Thanks, guys. Marco and Leia will be camping out at the GOP watch party all night. But for now, let's go to Terrence Holton and Daniela Lake, just a few miles away in downtown. Terrence, Daniela, what's going on over there?
Well, guys, as you just mentioned, we're in downtown Los Angeles at the J.W. Merritt. We're at an election watch party put on by the California Democrats. And right now, there's not a lot of people here. The event starts soon, but soon coming up, we're going to have an interview on. Daniela, do you want to introduce it?
Yeah, so right now we'll be interviewing District Attorney George Gascon on camera. He's running for re-election for District Attorney, and we have a couple of questions for you. First thing we wanted to ask is, what are some of the issues that are top of mind for you tonight on election night?
Look, I mean, certainly my re-election is one of them because I believe that so much is riding and the continuation of not only the safety of our community, but the thoughtfulness and, continuing the reform efforts. I'm obviously worried about the national election too. I voted for Ms. Harris, and I'm, praying and thinking very hard about her getting reelected, or not reelected, but get elected to president. So those are the things that are really, swirling in my mind right now.
And as a former police officer, what does it mean that a former district attorney, a prosecutor from California, is running against a now convicted felon? What does that mean to you?
Well, it's amazing to me, right, that we actually can have someone that has been convicted of felonies and other crimes that actually still qualifies to be a president of the United States. But that's the state of affairs today, and we just got to make sure that Ms. Harris is the one that gets elected, and then we won't have to worry about him anymore.
Right, and something at the top of minds of a lot of Californians and national people is just the district is the decision to open the case for the Menendez brothers. Can you give us any information? What is that about?
Yeah, look, I mean, we have resentenced over 330 cases in the last 4 years with under 1% recidivism rate. The Menendez case is a case that we've had for about a year. We actually had a habeas petition, and then we had a resentencing request. I decided to go with the resentencing process, which is basically under California law. If you were convicted of a crime before you were age 26, and you have rehabilitated and been in prison for a significant period of time, they've been in prison for about 35 years, and they have rehabilitated themselves, and they're safe to be reintegrated in the community, they should be released. So that's the tool that I'm using in order to hopefully get their release. But this is only 2 cases out of about 330 cases. I understand they're famous, and a lot of people are paying attention to them. They don't pay attention when you have the poor black and brown kids that have been going through the same process. But, I'm very hopeful that actually, because of who they are, they're going to put the spotlight into this. We have hundreds of people in our prisons today that could be released safely, have paid their debt to society, and it makes no sense to continue to incarcerate them.
And in just a few short words, do you have any words of encouragement for young voters, for Gen Z?
Well, I mean, look, first of all, vote, right? Vote, and, voting every election that you qualify for. I think this obviously is a critical election, and hopefully you voted already. If not, you do so before the polls close today. But I think also be an informed voter, right? It's important to vote, but it's also important to be familiar with the issues, especially so much of what's going on. Whether you're talking about national race or you're talking the district attorney's race, at the end of the day, really, is you guys, the ones that are going to live with this mess, right? So you want to do everything that you can to make sure that the world's going to look a little better, and hopefully then you take it to the next level.
Well, DA Gascon, thank you very much for your time. We really appreciate it. We're going to be coming with you guys, interviews and all that sort of stuff later. Until then, back to the studio.
Thank you, Terrence. Thank you, Daniela. Now, as Gascon mentioned, decarceration has been a huge topic of Gascon's re-election campaign. It was something that he did during his own tenure as DA of Los Angeles County, making sure and giving second chances to younger juvenile offenders. Stephen, can you tell us a little bit more about what he's running on?
Yeah, I mean, you heard it from himself, right? He's all about this rehabilitation style of being a district attorney, right? So it's about giving people that second chance, especially minors that were convicted or people that were convicted when they were very young. Now, some have said he's taken that decarceration too far, some being his opponent, Nathan Hochman. Hochman takes more of that hard middle approach when it comes to being a district attorney and wants to bring that back to California. Within just days of being elected the district attorney of California, Gascon put in things that reduced cash bail for most offenses. He also refused to prosecute many misdemeanors. Those were then rolled back later in his term. So it's going to be interesting to see how people feel about approval ratings going into tonight for Gascon. Hochman, again, he leads right now in the polls going into tonight.
Right. I mean, we saw the beginning of those polls over a month ago in an LA Times and a USC poll. The first one said that Hochman was leading by 30 points over Gascon. A more recent one said he was leading by just 25 points. That speaks to, I think, some of the sentiments of Los Angeles voters. They're worried that crime is on the rise. They're worried that retail theft, drug offenses are on the up, and that will help Hochman in this campaign, I believe.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we do have some more updates to our electoral vote count. The states of Iowa and Kansas have been called for former President Donald Trump. Now, I know there was some recent polling that showed that these states may have been within a closer margin of error than we expected prior to tonight, but it does look like that Kansas's 6 electoral votes, as well as Iowa's 6, have contributed to Donald Trump's totals tonight.
Now, Iowa, I think, is one that is surprisingly catching people off guard here, right? It's a solid red state, and it has been. But just over the weekend, there was a kind of a surprising poll that came out. Ann Seltzer, who is an independent pollster who has kind of a scary accuracy. She was one of the first people to say that Barack Obama would reach the Democratic National Convention. She called it for Trump in 2016 and for Biden in 2020. She said that Harris would lead by 4 points. And that she was one of the only people to do that. So this is surprising.
We appreciate it, Sophie. And now we're going to move into how the election has been shaping up over the past few months leading into tonight. Has been rather hectic. And if you've been having trouble keeping up with the timeline, Annenberg Media's Joseph McGill breaks it down for us.
And it will probably be the most important vote you ever cast.
The 2024 election cycle will go down as one of the fastest news cycles in American history. This cycle started with the fallout from the CNN debate on June 27th between President Joe Biden and former President Donald Trump. Biden's team hoped the debate would dispel concerns about his age being an issue. It did just the opposite, with several prominent Biden gaffes setting the media tone for the coming weeks.
Eligible for what I've been able to do with the COVID.
Just 2 weeks later, the former president was the victim of an assassination attempt. A bullet grazed his ear, and footage from the event became a galvanizing call for the Republican Party.
I stand before you in this arena only by the grace of Almighty God.
Calls for Biden to pass the torch to someone who could beat Trump grew louder. On July 21st, Biden caved to these demands and announced he would not seek re-election. He instead endorsed his vice president, Kamala Harris. Within 24 hours, the vice president had secured several prominent endorsements within the party. On August 5th, Harris secured the nomination less than 2 weeks after Biden's announcement.
Thank you, please, thank you so very much. Thank you, everyone.
Harris and Trump debated just once. Vice President candidates Tim Walz and J.D. Vance also debated. Trump has refused to do any more debates and canceled several public appearances. Both have done town hall events and podcast interviews to reach more voters. And, of course, many, many rallies in the 7 swing states. For Annenberg Media, this is Joseph McGill.
Now, we saw it in the previous reporting. It's important to note that the Harris campaign has only been campaigning for 3 months. Her novelty, both as a candidate, has sort of shifted some voters' look of her. We don't know her as well, therefore we won't vote for her, is kind of a sentiment that a lot of voters have been having over the last few months.
Right. I mean, in her closing speech at the Ellipse just over a week ago, she said, you may still be getting to know me. Mm-hmm. And I think that kind of speaks to a lot of voter sentiment, right? It was an uphill battle to get to know Harris from the Biden administration compared to Trump, who has been president once, and people know him from the spotlight for well over 8 years now. As the votes are being counted, the country is buzzing online. For more on the Gen Z vote and how this conversation is unfolding digitally, let's head over to social correspondent Siara Carpenter.
Much, Sophie. For many members of Gen Z, this is their first time being able to vote in a general election. However, considering their activism during the 2020 election, as well as the summer of 2020 following the murder of George Floyd, both presidential candidates understand that they cannot count them out. Oftentimes during presidential elections, Gen Z or younger voters are ignored because they don't normally vote. However, since 2018, young voters have been coming out in droves, and mobilization is key. Let's go to my monitor. Certain groups like Babe Vote through UNLV have been giving out free lifts to the polls. In addition, they have also been registering young people to vote. Essentially meaning that they are taking care of every part of the process. They are giving people every single thing that they would need to be able to access their votes. In addition, social media has been key. Online groups like Kamala HQ, as well as Team Trump, have been posting sound bites of their respective candidates' speeches, as well as funny memes. Things that would be relatable for Gen Z voters who are normally getting most of their news through social media. In addition, celebrity endorsements have been very high during this campaign, and this has also significantly influenced many voters. In turn, there have been very long lines at many college campuses spanning the entire country because Gen Z is united on things such as abortion, healthcare, the economy, and LGBTQ rights. Overall, this is showing that grassroots organization as well as social media campaigning is insanely effective when it comes to speaking to young voters. Gen Z is a force to be reckoned with, and they might be able to close the gap in certain battleground states. This is Siara from the Halo. Back to you guys in the studio.
Thank you, Siara. National polls are being counted, and we're beginning to get a better picture of what the night is shaping to look like. Payton, what do you have for us?
Thanks, Malcolm. Votes are starting to roll in, especially from critical swing states in this year's election. These are states that can be won by either Democrats or Republicans and are a key factor in helping either candidate reach the coveted 270 electoral votes. Both candidates have spent considerable time in each of these 7 states in hopes of winning both their electoral votes and the White House. Let's take a look at Pennsylvania first. 61% of the vote has been reported in, and Kamala Harris is behind Donald Trump with 48% of the vote to 51% of Donald Trump's. President Joe Biden won the state of Pennsylvania by a narrow margin of just over 1% in 2020 after Donald Trump captured the state by just 0.7 percentage points in 2016. Pennsylvania has 19 electoral votes, the most of any swing state this election cycle. Let's look now to Michigan, which is reporting 24% of their vote in. Vice President Kamala Harris is just narrowly trailing former President Donald Trump 48% to 49%. The battleground state of Michigan is worth 16 electoral votes and was won by President Joe Biden by 2.8 percentage points in 2020. Polls have had each candidate in a neck-and-neck tie leading up to Election Day. Rounding out our blue wall states is Wisconsin. Together with Michigan and Pennsylvania, these 3 swing states were Democratic strongholds before Donald Trump won them in 2016. Wisconsin has the least of the three with just 10 electoral votes, and currently with 56% of the vote reported in, has Donald Trump leading Kamala Harris by just 1 percentage point, 49% to 48%. Let's take a look now at North Carolina, which has 15% of electoral votes and is reporting 84% of their votes in. As of now, former President Donald Trump is leading Kamala Harris by 2 percentage points, 50% to 48%. Republicans have carried the state of North Carolina in 11 of the last 13 presidential elections, and in 2020, Donald Trump won the state by over 70,000 votes. Now, in early voting, North Carolina reported record-breaking early voting this election cycle, with over 4.2 million ballots cast as of Sunday, according to the State Board of Elections. Let's go now to the Sunbelt state of Georgia, which is also worth 16 electoral votes. With 79% of the vote reported in thus far, Kamala Harris is trailing Donald Trump by 5 percentage points, 52% to 47%. In 2020, Joe Biden won the state of Georgia by just 12,000 votes, and he was the first Democrat to do so since Bill Clinton clinched the state in 1992. We'll be taking a look at the remaining 2 swing states of Nevada and Arizona once more of their votes have been counted.
Thank you, Payton. And now we had discussed all the importance of these different swing states. I wanted to bring up the point of Iowa as it went to Trump today. Just a few days ago, according to a Des Moines Register Mediacom Iowa poll, had Harris leading 47% to 44%, but the state still went to Trump. So this sort of pensions on the notion of these polls are as accurate as possible, but that it doesn't quite convey what exactly that state will turn into. You had kind of mentioned the blue wall between Michigan and Pennsylvania and Wisconsin that went for Trump in 2016 and then flipped for Biden. How are we looking for this to shape out throughout the rest of the night?
Yeah, absolutely. I think you make a really good point that polls really are not indicative of everything. We saw this in 2016 and in 2020 when pollsters inaccurately predicted the outcomes of this election, especially in 2016 with Donald Trump outpacing the polls, winning by much larger margins in many of these critical swing states. And I think that's what we're seeing in tonight's results as well. Even though both candidates have been neck and neck in these 7 states, throughout this election cycle, you know, in each state, neither of them leading the other by more than 1 percentage point. I think tonight's results showing just how close these races are really do indicate that we cannot know until every single vote is counted. You know, Joe Biden won Arizona by 11,000 votes. Won a lot of these states by less than 20,000 votes. That really is not a significant number. So until these counties and states are reporting, significant voter totals that they can say definitively, they can call these races, we really won't know until tomorrow or, maybe at the end of the week at the latest.
Well, I think it's also important to note, and you just mentioned, we probably won't know who the winner of this race is tonight. Right. I mean, it's going to be, even within California, right? If you look at the House races, California is kind of notorious for not calling their House races or their proposition races until days and days later. So it could take all the way until the weekend until we know the results.
In LA tonight, hundreds of thousands of votes cast early and in person will end up at a ballot processing center in the City of Industry, where Annenberg Media's Kayla Quintero is reporting from.
I'm here at the ballot processing center in the City of Industry, where officials and law enforcement are making sure that your vote is not only counted, but protected. Tonight, ballots from the more than 600 polling places in LA County will be transported here by sheriff's deputies. And while this facility is open to the public, they do this in order to maintain voters' trust and the integrity of the vote counting process. And a worker here did let me know that while 1.8 million ballots have already been processed, they're still expecting to see many more pour in as the end of the election day nears. For Annenberg Media, I'm Kayla Quintero. Back to you in the studio.
Tonight's Wallace Annenberg Hall is packed with people watching election results come in.
Jack Waterman is standing by in Studio A with more on the reactions of people right outside.
Yeah, thanks, Sophie, so much. And as you can see behind me here, it is standing room only here in the Wallace Annenberg Forum here. There are people watching the live election watch party here going on from 7 p.m. all the way through 11 p.m. tonight. And throughout the night here in Studio A, we're going to be talking to a variety of students, professors, and experts on their thoughts here on election night. And today in the studio, we are joined with Professor Mary Murphy. Mary Murphy is a professor of journalism here at USC, as well as the faculty lead of the Women's Leadership Initiative here at USC, the Women's Leadership Society. Professor Murphy, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you very much. You know, one of the great things that I witnessed at the very beginning when Kamala Harris took over, was how all these amazing women in the Senate and the Congress stepped up to support her. There was like this bond of women that I hadn't seen publicly before, that women know this is how you get the support. And the fact that she had all those women, I say, Women's Leadership Society, we are getting stronger.
Yeah, and obviously would be the first female president. What might that mean for young women across the country, but I guess anyone across the country?
Well, you know, I think we have had many women leaders. People keep saying, will she crack the glass ceiling? Glass is fragile. It's been cracked many times. We just need one person more to do it, and it's going to be done. If it's Kamala Harris, fantastic, and if not, it's going to happen. I have no fear that this is going to happen.
Yeah, absolutely. And Professor Murphy, you spent a lot of time in your career reporting on Hollywood and entertainment, which obviously plays a huge role in any election. What role especially has Hollywood in the world of entertainment played in shaping this election?
Well, Hollywood has played a role for decades, but this election, I have to say, two really important things happened. George Clooney wrote an op-ed in the New York Times asking his dear friend Joe Biden to step down. And not only was it impactful, but it stopped the funding in Hollywood. So that was impactful. And Taylor Swift took advantage of the timing for people to register to vote, young people. And those two people, besides Beyonce and Spike Lee and Tyler Perry and Han Solo, I mean, everybody. But whether it will have an impact, I don't know. Because people in the country, sometimes they want to see politics on award shows, and sometimes they don't want to hear from celebrities about politics. So I think celebrities have stepped up more than ever to take a role really in helping shape our environment and helping shape politics and race. So I think celebrities actually now belong.
Well, whether you like it or not, it's certainly a thing that affects our election today. And thank you so much for joining us. This has been so insightful. And we'll be coming to you live here in just a little bit with more interviews. That watch party, again, is going all night here. So we'll be back in Studio A in just a little bit. But for now, back to y'all in the studio.
Thanks, Jack. And now let's go to Michaela Eidelberg in the Media Center. Michaela, what do you have for us?
Sophie, again, I'm coming to you live from the Wallace Annenberg Hall Media Center, and today I'm joined by Eric Hogenson, who is a Democratic political consultant and the president of HSG Campaigns. Eric, thank you so much for joining us today.
Happy to be here. Thanks.
So just to jump right in, as a campaign consultant, what goes into creating a successful campaign?
So the way we approach campaigns just in general is having like three main areas of focus. One is we always put together a clear written plan. Number two, we focus on not making any critical mistakes for the plan. And then third, we always look at what's happening during the campaign and in the environment to make adjustments. So that's just really kind of simple benchmarks we have when we approach campaign work.
For sure. And now when it comes to younger voters, in what ways do you think that Vice President Kamala Harris and former President Trump have appealed to younger voters with their campaigns? Like, do you think it works? Do you think they're out of touch? Sort of in that sense.
Yeah, so it seems to me that there's been a lot of really effective outreach from both campaigns to the younger voters. We've heard a lot today about long lines in college towns and just the younger voters being really engaged in the process. I think it has to do with, like, I think in general the younger voters are a little bit difficult to get a read on in terms of which direction they're always going. They're notoriously a difficult group to get polling data on, given their cell phone habits and online habits. It can be hard to get a read on what they're doing. And I've also seen research that shows over half of younger voters actually aren't necessarily honest with pollsters when they talk to them. And I think that makes some sense, just given the political environment we live in and how fraught it is and how, potentially dangerous or difficult it is by giving your political opinions. So I think the campaigns have done a nice job of reaching out to them, but exactly how they're voting and how they're kind of lining up is difficult to read for some of those reasons.
So now you've mentioned polling, and we've seen a trend of like Latino men, young Latino men and young black men leaning more Republican, especially for this election season, and also black women tend to lean more Democratic. So as a Latino yourself, do you think either candidate did a good job of reaching these diverse communities?
Yeah, so I think these are interesting communities to look at, and if you start to look at the cultural components of them, then you see some of the reasons why they're breaking in different ways. And, this in general, when you think about these communities not always voting on necessarily ethnic identity issues, but also economic issues and other issues that may be more important to them and be factoring into how they're voting. So I think, Trump has this sort of macho appeal that he's been playing into for a long time. I think some of these ethnic voters kind of gravitate towards that. And frankly, his sort of basic economic message can also be appealing to some of these ethnic voters. So kind of going beyond the ethnic piece of it and the identity piece into other areas.
For sure. Well, thank you so much for joining us, Eric. And I'm going to toss it back to you guys in the studio.
Thank you, Michaela. Coming up, we have a live interview with David Seamus, an expert on voter sentiment and former CEO of the Obama Foundation. We'll also take a look at key Senate races happening across the country and update you on propositions in the Golden State as polls on the West Coast have just closed. Stay with us.
Presenting sheer madness, Circuit City's Midnight Madness Sale. Wednesday only till midnight, Circuit City will go raving mad with shocking reductions on hundreds of items. Wednesday only, this Sony 19-inch color TV with remote control, just $397. Save on this JVC compact disc player, just $198. Circuit City's Midnight Madness Sale. Get there by midnight before the curtain falls.
What? There's something under the bed. I heard something. There's nothing under the bed. I heard something. Oh. See, look. It's just Fluffy. He got scared by a dumb cat. I wasn't scared.
I told you there was nothing under the bed.
Gosh, Burger Chef, it's Wolfburger the werewolf.
Where can I get delicious burgers? Where can I get fun food? Where, oh where?
At Burger Chef.
Where?
And now at participating Burger Chefs, you can buy fun meals that now come on Halloween magic meal trays. There's a magic trick in each fun meal. There are 10 different magic meal tricks you can collect.
Burger Chef, you're incredible!
That sounded like a wolf! And it's getting closer!
Peekaboo!
Count Chocula! Did you hear a wolf?
It was Wolfie, howling for the 2 new marshmallows in my Count Chocula cereal. The lovely chocolatey part of this complete breakfast.
2 new marshmallows?
Yes, the new full moon and chocolate wolf marshmallows make Count Chocula a howling delight.
For a limited time, you can try the full moon and chocolate wolf marshmallows inside new shiny boxes of Count Chocula.
Back to ATVN's special election coverage.
It's about 8 p.m. here on the West Coast, and polls in California have just closed. In fact, we have some new news coming from California. California has been called for Kamala Harris, and Adam Schiff is the new California senator.
Washington also went to Harris, as well as Utah and Iowa. Those last 2 states have now gone to Trump, according to our most recent polls.
Payton, what updates can you share with us nationally?
Yeah, absolutely. So we know that results are starting to stream in from those swing states that I mentioned earlier, but we're also keeping a close watch on races that will affect the makeup of the U.S. Senate. Prior to tonight, Democrats currently held a 51 to 49 seat majority, but Republicans are hoping to flip control in some of the country's most competitive races, including in West Virginia, which has already flipped from Joe Manchin to the Republican candidate tonight. So in terms of the states that we are watching, we're looking at Nevada, Arizona, Montana, Texas, Wisconsin, Michigan, Ohio, and Pennsylvania, which are home to some of the most highly contested U.S. Senate races this election cycle. While most of these seats are held by Democratic incumbent candidates, Republicans are hopeful that changing demographics will hand them control of the chamber. In Michigan, Democratic Representative Alyssa Slotkin is running against former Republican Representative Mike Rogers. The seat is being vacated by Democrat Debbie Stabenow, whose retirement is leaving this high-stakes seat up for grabs. Prior to tonight, the Cook Political Report rated this race as a toss-up, but they've given Slotkin a very slight edge as of November 1st. With 25% of the vote reported in, Slotkin is narrowly trailing Rogers 48 to 49%. I'd also like to add that according to the AP, we are still waiting on a number of votes from Wayne and Macomb County, which are home to Detroit, which is typically a Democratic stronghold in the state. Let's take a look now in Ohio, where Democratic Senator Sherrod Brown is facing off against Republican businessman Bernie Moreno. Brown has held the seat since 2007 and is the only Democrat holding statewide office in Ohio. The closely watched race has surpassed $450 million in ad spending, making it the most expensive non-presidential contest on record. With 85% of the vote reported in, Brown appears to be trailing Moreno 45 to 58%. In Pennsylvania, incumbent Democratic Senator Bob Casey is fighting for his seat against Republican hedge fund CEO David McCormick. The Cook Political Report has this race as a toss-up, with polls swinging both ways within the margin of error. With only 5% of the vote reported in, we are looking at Montana right now, which is Jon Tester against Tim Sheehy. Jon Tester is in the political fight of his life against Sheehy and is currently trailing him 42% to 56%. Sheehy has consistently polled higher than Tester in recent weeks, and the Cook Political Report says that this race is leaning Republican. We'll continue to keep you updated as more votes come in. Let's go now to Arizona, where independent Senator Kristen Sinema will not be seeking re-election. Hoping to take her place is Democratic Representative Ruben Gallego and former TV news anchor Kari Lake. I visited Arizona just a few weeks ago, where we heard from the candidates and spoke to voters across the state. Gallego, a second-generation immigrant, was making significant outreach efforts towards Latino voters, which make up roughly a quarter of the state's electorate. His messaging has proven to be effective, as 538 polling had him outperforming Lake by 4 percentage points on average. Lake, who has yet to concede her 2022 gubernatorial loss, has aligned herself with the former president, but has struggled to match Trump's numbers in the states. For many Arizonans, it appears that Gallego's ground game has been instrumental in helping him make inroads with Latino men and moderate Republicans. Looking at tonight's results, with 49% of the vote reported in, Gallego is currently leading Lake 52% to 45%. Here in Arizona, this may be Democrats' best chance at defending their very slim majority that they currently hold. Thank you so much. Back to you guys at the desk.
Here with us tonight is former Obama Foundation President David Seamus. He's an expert on voter sentiment, and he's also teaching a class here at Annenberg this semester. David, welcome.
It's so good to be here. Happy Election Day.
Happy Election Day to you, too. David served as the Director of Political Affairs at the end of Barack Obama's administration. Now he manages the Emerson Collective, which invests in reform efforts from education and gun control to immigration. David, welcome to Studio C. Now, we want to start off with how the election looks today is very different from how it looked just 1 year ago today. What have you seen over the course of this campaign that has changed for both parties?
Well, the biggest change, obviously, was the switchover from President Biden to the Vice President Harris. This has never happened before. And so this is the first snap election in American presidential history. But one of the constant pieces of this that I think we're seeing play out tonight is that going into this election, former President Trump has the highest favorability ratings he has ever enjoyed. He was scoring in a two-way race against the Democrat at the highest level he's ever enjoyed. And his advances on the economy and immigration in terms of salient issues for people have been at the highest level that you've seen. And so while the race changed dramatically, those fundamentals with Trump just did not change. And I think that's what we're seeing so far.
And this weekend, independent pollster Ann Slauser placed Harris ahead of Trump by 4 points in Iowa. And now that we've seen that Iowa has flipped for Trump, what do these numbers kind of say about this younger voting demographic?
So I think when you look at younger voters, you have to divide between college and non-college because these are entirely different universes of voters. If you look across the battleground states today, among non-college voters, a majority of 18 to 29-year-olds select former President Trump. Among young college voters, a majority select Vice President Harris. But then the other thing that's more complicated now than ever before is a massive gender gap between young men and young women in a way that I have just never, ever seen play out. And so if you think about the Trump strategy over the course of the past month with appearances on Rogan and the podcasts that he did, was intended to drive these low propensity turnout young men to vote at rates that they had never done before. On the flip side, if you look at the vice president did with a lot of the messaging, certainly on abortion, in some of the podcasts and other efforts that she did, was meant to really drive up that young female vote in a way that she really needed. And so it's an open question right now, whether or not what you're seeing is a division in the young electorate that is specific to Donald Trump in this moment in time, or is this a case of young voters going back to, certainly young men, back to being more conservative, in the most conservative since the 1980s with former President Ronald Reagan.
I see. I mean, you bring up good points. 2016 and 2020 were one of the first times that young college-educated voters actually voted blue rather than red. What kind of changed in 2016 that you think led to that we might see again in 2024?
So Barack Obama did extraordinarily well with young voters, but the movement in 2016 was amazing. And I think that there was initially a significant reaction to Trump. And Clinton really focused a lot of her effort on young voters and getting them out. I think what you've seen over the course of the past 8 years, again, is around this college, non-college, and gender divide in a way that I've just never seen. And I believe that at the heart of it is also just the changing landscape of media consumption. In 2019, the average 18 to 22-year-old consumed about 100 minutes, I think, per day, not 100 minutes per day. It was essentially an hour and a half per day on social video across the platforms. As of last month, that's 2 hours and 45 minutes per day consuming social video across the social media platforms. And what that means is essentially you have create your own media consumption environment in a way that Republicans have been way ahead of Democrats up until recently, especially with young men, in creating that ecosystem in a way that I think today they are benefiting from. So this is also a big driver in what you're seeing.
Right. I mean, just days after Kamala announced that she would be running for the presidency, she blew up on Twitter, on Instagram, on TikTok, things like Kamala's brat. You know, she was getting these celebrity endorsements and they were getting retweeted and reposted, and that certainly boosted to young voters knowing who she was for the first time.
100%.
So thank you, David, for your insight. It's truly appreciated.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Perfect. Now we're going to lead into a little bit more discussion of the Senate races that we're seeing across the country. As Payton discussed earlier, we're seeing some tight swing states, including some split ticket voting in states like Arizona. Arizona voters in particular are a certainly split demographic. About a third are registered Republican, a third Democrat, and a third other. Almost a definition of a toss-up in a state. Now, Payton, you had boots on the ground talking with Arizona voters just a few weeks ago. What did you hear?
Yeah, absolutely, Sophie. So I actually went with a group of other Annenberg students, and we were there for about 5 days speaking to voters at both Harris rallies, Vance rallies. We went to ASU and we spoke to college students. We went to polling locations. So we really tried to get a feel for voters on the ground and the kinds of issues that they were concerned with. Arizona is a border state, and that is very clear when talking to voters. They view immigration as one of the most significant issues, which is an issue that both Kamala Harris and Donald Trump have touched on, but with very different rhetoric surrounding the issue. And especially when talking to voters specifically in Phoenix and in Tucson, we went to multiple of these different counties. People really do feel strongly about it. It's something that they feel affects them personally. They've had individual experiences with it, and so that is really what's driving a lot of their vote.
Compare and contrast for me, right? Being in California, where we go to school, right, and where we are right now. How is the energy different in a state that we kind of know where they're going to go when it comes to the election versus in Arizona, where it really could go either way?
Honestly, I have never really seen anything like it. I also come from the state of Washington, which is a traditionally Democratic stronghold, right? You know, typically candidates aren't campaigning in that state. We often don't see candidates coming to California all that frequently either. The, exception being Kamala Harris, who's from the Bay Area. And so Arizona really was a completely different vibe. The candidates have spent a lot of time in that state. They know how important it is to drive voters out in Arizona. We talked about how in 2020, President Joe Biden won the state by only 11,000 votes. It's also home to Maricopa County, which is home to 2.3 million voters. It's one of the largest counties in the United States. They understand that there's a lot at stake in Arizona, and that specifically the issues that they're talking about, immigration, the economy, these are issues that are at the forefront of Arizonans' minds. So they know that they need to reach voters in Arizona, which is why the vibe is so strong there and why they feel they need to really go and reach out to those voters.
Right. I mean, we're seeing right now that campaigning really is making a difference, but that it's strong on both sides, right? Even just right now, polls are looking at 49.7% for either candidate. So it truly is a toss-up. As we're starting to see with other races across the country, Georgia is looking a little bit more red right now, but we know that has been changing every so often. Same with this blue wall, Minnesota, Wisconsin, and Michigan. What can you tell us about what these voters think, and what can you tell us what might be influencing some of the issues that they care about?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we've seen this with all of these critical battleground states. The issues that are on the top of voters' minds, the economy, immigration, reproductive rights access, abortion, and democracy. These are really what voters are caring about. And especially when we look at exit polling, immigration, the economy, and abortion really do tend to be the rights, the issues that are concerning most voters, which is why there's been such a large push to talk about these in both candidates' closing message in the coming weeks. Republicans are expecting to pick up between 2 and 5 Senate seats tonight. I know we've just talked about the presidential race, but there's also a lot at stake in the Senate as well. And these races are continuing to look neck and neck as more votes are coming in. We will keep you updated at home as both parties hope to keep or flip control of the chamber. Let's take another look back at our electoral map now, where the AP has continued to call a few more states. Kamala Harris has now reached the number of 179 electoral votes, and Donald Trump is at 214. The state of California was recently called for Harris, which added 54 electoral votes to her count, helping her jump significantly. But we are still seeing those results come in throughout the night.
Thank you, Payton. A 2024 Pew Research study cited gun violence as one of the top issues on the November ballot. Let's turn to Shamay Bage, a student volunteer at the Houston chapter of March for Our Lives, a student-led organization that supports gun control. Sami, thank you for joining us. Can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Thank you very much. Now, we had sort of some ideas on our end of like a misconception that people have surrounding gun control. And a lot of people tend to think that people are trying to ban all guns. What exactly are gun control advocates looking to regulate?
Yeah, thank you for bringing up that misconception. So there is actually a misconception that gun owners are scared of, that gun violence prevention advocates are scared of guns or that they don't own guns at all, but this is markedly untrue. A lot of the gun violence prevention advocates that I know and hold near and dear to my heart own guns. Gabby Giffords, who is a longstanding gun violence prevention champion, is a gun owner. Kamala Harris and Tim Walz are both gun owners. Steve Kling, who is a colleague at Giffords, who is a veteran, is also a gun owner. My family owns guns. So many Americans do, and we support, as gun violence prevention advocates, we support the Second Amendment. And I think a key word there is that we responsibly support the Second Amendment. I mean, a lot of the common gun violence prevention laws, the common gun sense laws that we see that Americans want to implement in the United States, are the majority of them support. These are not radical laws. A lot of people back them, and it's just a matter of whether or not we can enact them in the United States.
You mentioned a good point, right? Harris and Walz have both mentioned that they own guns themselves, but we're curious, do comments like these actually change the way that voters look at candidates?
In my mind, I don't think so. I think the issue of gun violence prevention is increasingly salient when it comes to how voters vote in the polls. And I think regardless of whether or not candidates own guns is relevant for whether or not people vote for a certain candidate, because at the end of the day, it's about whether or not they support responsible gun laws, right? It's about whether they support ERPOs, red flag laws, or just the right for domestic violence survivors to be protected from gun violence. Like, all of these things are prevalent regardless of whether or not a candidate owns guns in the first place.
Now, with Texas being an open carry state, does that pose an issue for you and your group when you're maybe protesting or setting up rallies and trying to get laws passed?
I think open carry is definitely a huge issue here because regulation surrounding guns is a big problem. But in the state of Texas, I think, I know right now it's looking quite bleak when we look at the election map, but at the end of the day, our fight continues. Even if the election doesn't go our way, we won't pack our bags and leave. Even I've lived in Texas like my whole life, and it's been very difficult, fighting for gun violence prevention measures. But we've proven time and time again that we show up and we continue to advocate for our cause, regardless of who is in the White House, who is in governor seats, or who's in the Senate. We will always, regardless of who's in a leadership position, we will continue to march for our lives. We will continue to support common sense gun laws, and we will continue to uphold the voices of survivors and young people.
Thank you, Sami. I mean, you just as you said, March for Our Lives has been around since 2018. In those 6 years, do you feel you've seen tangible change through your activism?
I think yes. There has definitely been a shift towards more data-driven solutions. There has been a huge moratorium on funding for gun violence prevention research, and having that moratorium lifted and having a lot of researchers be able to understand gun violence more is an essential point, and it has clearly shaped how we approach this issue. And on top of that, gun violence, as we all know now, is the leading cause of death for children. And that was especially clear after Trump's presidency. And now knowing that has definitely shifted how we approach gun violence. It is a public health issue. So Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, I'm sure, will approach gun violence as a public health issue. And they have done this through the Office of Gun Violence Prevention, through the Bipartisan Safe Versus Communities Act, and then also recognizing that healthcare communities have an essential role in preventing gun violence on a daily basis.
Thank you for joining us, Sami. We appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Now, we also want to mention to you that North Carolina has just been called for former President Donald Trump, bringing the initial total of electoral votes from 230 for Donald Trump and 179 for Vice President Harris. Now, a lot can happen in just a few moments tonight, so let's head back to Marco and Leah at the Make California Great Again watch party in Long Beach. Marco, Leah, is there anything new happening with where you're at?
Yeah, as Leah mentioned earlier, there are quite a bit of Trump inflatables here in Long Beach today, but there's 3. And this one behind me right here is probably the biggest Donald Trump I have ever seen. I think he clears me by quite a little bit, but come inside. I want to set the scene for you guys. Right away as you enter the Roscoe's Chicken and Waffles, to the right you have the red carpet, and this is where all the guests and the guest speakers are coming in, and they go to the room where all the action is happening right here. You can follow me down the red carpet, and off to the right, this is where the guest speakers are speaking, and the voters are sitting. And I talked to a lot of these voters, and the issue that they care about is the economy. They want the presidential candidate that's going to deliver them that strong economy, and this is something that Trump has made a forefront when it's come to his campaign. He's constantly at his rallies saying, are you better off now or are you better off where you were 4 years ago? And his supporters show support for that. But the former president has faced some Democratic lashback when it comes to the economy. Recently, former President Barack Obama was speaking in the battleground state of Pennsylvania and said that Trump inherited that good economy from Obama's administration in the 8 years that he was in office. But if you look at the GDP growth rate numbers, which focuses on the economics of the presidential terms, Obama was sitting at around 2.4% and Trump at 2.5% when he took office. So not too much of a juxtaposition when it comes to those numbers, but economic growth can be measured in a lot of different ways. And the people here, they care about what affects Americans in their day-to-day lives, and that's inflation. They want the presidential candidate that's going to lower prices for them at the pump, that's going to lower prices for them at the grocery store, and is going to lower prices for them when it comes to housing. So we'll have to see which presidential candidate is going to deliver that as the night unfolds here on this infamous election night. But for now, we were reporting live here in Long Beach. I'm Marco Ramirez. Back to you guys in the studio.
Thank you, Marco. Now let's check back in with Daniela and Terrence, who have been at the California Democrats watch party for the last hour. Daniela, Terrence, has anything shifted from the last time we spoke?
Yeah, so we're at the California Democratic Party's election night watch party. We're downtown at the JW Marriott. As you can hear, there's some really loud music playing. People are just starting to trickle in, and the Associated Press has called the race for Adam Schiff. And that's actually who we're expecting to hear from first tonight. They have a lineup of notable Democrats. They want to kick off the night with Adam Schiff, and then Senator Alex Padilla, Attorney General Rob Bonta, and LA Mayor Karen Bass. And as I said, people are just now starting to trickle in. At every single table, there's shirts that say Harris Walsh, there's tote bags that say Adam Schiff for Senate. So people here are excited about all the Democrats up and down the ballot, and of course, excited for Kamala Harris, who there are signs for Kamala here that say Kamala Harris for President, daughter of California. So we'll be speaking to supporters throughout the night and giving you live updates. I'm Danielle. Back to you, Sophie and Malcolm.
Thank you, Daniela. The AP has now called North Carolina for President Trump with its 16 electoral votes.
That brings the total electoral vote count for Vice President Kamala Harris to 187 and former President Donald Trump to 230.
California polls closed about 26 minutes ago now. Let's take a look at some of the results we're seeing for California Senate. And you heard it earlier, the AP has called the race for Senate between Congressman Adam Schiff and former Dodger first baseman Steve Garvey. Adam Schiff has won. That means that he will represent California in the Senate and take over the seat of the late Dianne Feinstein. Beyond candidate races, you may have noticed a variety of propositions on your California ballot. These are measures that have been placed on the ballot either by the California State Legislature or a petition signed by registered voters. Let's take a look at some of the most contested California propositions this election season. Proposition 3 is less about policy, and it's going to be more about language and precedent. This prop seeks to change the language of the California state constitution to recognize marriage as a fundamental right regardless of sex or race. We also have Prop 4. This focuses on the environment. If passed, Prop 4 will approve $10 billion in bonds to support climate projects and measures across the state. This includes projects with clean water initiatives, wildfire prevention, and protection of communities and lands. Proposition 33, that's about rent prices. This prop seeks to expand a local government's authority to enact rent control on residential properties. If approved, landlords may be limited in how much they can charge tenants and how often they can increase rent prices. Our final prop to watch tonight is Proposition 32. This proposition looks to raise the California minimum wage from $16 to $18. If approved, California would have the highest statewide minimum wage in the country. In addition to propositions on your California ballot, you may have noticed Measure A. Measure A tackles one of the most debated issues among California voters, homelessness. Brianna Rue has the story.
Los Angeles voters are being asked to vote on Measure A, a half-cent sales tax increase designed to support homelessness. This initiative will ask organizations like the Homeless Outreach Program for Integrated Care and Support, or HOPICS, provide crucial resources to those in need.
We are here to talk about Measure A, which is critically important because without Measure A, the important work that HOPICS and many organizations like ours across the county and city is doing will go away.
Right now, we're going to go ahead and see a client. He was living in Mexico and he was actually playing professional soccer over there, so he was actually living good. And he came over here to try to, I guess, live the American dream, and it just kind of all came down at once.
The housing crisis in Los Angeles has been a critical issue for years, with the unhoused population rising to about 75,000. This new measure will continue combating homelessness by introducing new initiatives such as affordable housing, rent relief, and legal services to those facing eviction. With Measure A, organizations like HOPICS will be able to continue their work in providing essential services to the unhoused community.
Homeless Outreach Team.
Measure A will fund organizations that help unhoused individuals transition into safe housing by offering them the support and services they need. These organizations are then able to build trust with their clients, and because of this, many are empowered to take the first steps towards stability.
We need those allocated funds to help our clients. Some of our clients, they need clothes, they need shoes, hygiene. We help them, provide them with transportation services, so we need that funding so we are able to do our job.
Anti-tax groups oppose Measure A and question the effectiveness of past funding. Some call for more comprehensive solutions to tackle the root causes of homelessness. For Annenberg Media, this is Brianna Rue.
Thank you, Brianna. We'll have more on the issues on the California ballot and the latest results coming in a bit later in our election coverage.
We will now go back to Siara Carpenter, who's been monitoring social media all night. Siara, what can you tell us about the trends you're seeing right now?
Thank you so much, Sophie. So a trend that I've seen over the past few days on social media is that we're looking at the past, present, and future of this election cycle. Let's go to my monitor. A tense altercation broke out at an early voting site in South Carolina after a voter showed up in an anti-Biden hat. This happened 4 days ago. This is due to the fact that people are not allowed to wear items endorsing a certain candidate, and things have become very tense, especially in certain states. In addition, we've also seen a recap regarding both of our presidential candidates. Kamala Harris's 2024 in photos shows her with Biden, her at the DNC, and the iconic photo of the little girl looking up to her. In addition, we also see the debate, her sorority sisters supporting her at her campaign, and other photos that have been very important throughout the campaign. In addition, we have also recapped Trump's past. We see one of his supporters covering up his face from the infamous mugshot photo. We also see the infamous assassination attempt photo and other photos that have really characterized his campaign, such as the RNC, his job at McDonald's, and Elon Musk being a huge supporter of his, and many of his fans supporting Elon Musk. In addition, kind of coming to the present, we see that many people in Washington, D.C. are very tense right now. Many people are afraid that D.C. is going to suffer from people rioting. So many businesses are boarded up. In addition, there have also been extra fences that have been added outside of the White House. But finally, coming to the future, most news outlets are reporting that we simply will not know who has won the 2024 presidential race tonight. That we might know either tomorrow or in a couple days, or sometime even later than that. As races get called, we'll be the ones to let you know. This is Siara Carpenter from The Halo. Back to you guys in the studio.
Thank you, Siara. Let's kick it back to our national correspondent. Payton, what are we seeing at this point in the night?
Let's take a quick look at the map to see where each candidate stands. As of now, Kamala Harris is trailing Donald Trump with 187 electoral votes to the former president's 230. Now, we mentioned North Carolina, which has 16 electoral votes. This is one of the most likely paths that Donald Trump was looking at prior to tonight. If he is able to win North Carolina along with Georgia and Pennsylvania, that would bring him to 270. An additional path would be winning Arizona, Nevada, Georgia, and one Rust Belt state that isn't Pennsylvania. Those are his two paths to victory right now. We'll continue to check in with you as these races continue to be evaluated and called throughout the night. Votes are still being counted in the remaining states where polls have recently closed. Trump and Harris spent their final hours on the campaign trail yesterday in these 7 critical battleground states that we've mentioned. With less than 24 hours until polls closed, it was both candidates' opportunity to deliver their closing messages. I spoke with Dan Schnurr earlier this morning, who's an expert on campaign communications and political strategy. He shared a bit more about how each candidate's final remarks may influence today's results.
For the last several weeks, Trump's advisors have been working as hard as they possibly could to try to convince their candidate to stay on message. In the campaign advertising, they've been talking about inflation and immigration and crime very consistently. The candidate himself hasn't been nearly as consistent. Harris's campaign people believe that the fact that Trump has been even more off message than usual is benefiting them with late-breaking voters. We obviously don't know if that's the case yet, but there's no question that if you watch both candidates present their messages, Harris has been much more disciplined, almost methodical.
Dan shared that while late-breaking voters made up only 3 to 4% of the electorate, they are the ones that hold the key to decisive victories in each of these 7 swing states. Stay tuned as we hear from more expert voices later on in the night.
And next up on ATVN's special election coverage, we hear from Annenberg Media reporters who spoke with voters in key battleground states. Stick with us.
That sounded like a wolf, and it's getting closer.
Peekaboo!
Count Chocula! Did you hear a wolf?
It was Wolfie, howling for the 2 new marshmallows in my Count Chocula cereal. The lovely chocolatey part of this complete breakfast.
2 new marshmallows?
Yes, the new full moon and chocolate wolf marshmallows make Count Chocula a howling delight.
For a limited time, you can try the full moon and chocolate wolf marshmallows inside new shiny boxes of Count Chocula.
Wow, Millhouse, that frozen black cherries turned your tongue black. My tongue's black too.
Let me try.
Hey,
Must have black tongue.
This Halloween, the Simpsons are at Burger King. Now in every big kid's meal you can get a Simpsons spooky light up. They gleam, there is scream, and you can collect all 15 at Burger King. Where else?
This Halloween, Blockbuster Video has a special treat for your whole family. You can take home any of these great Halloween classics for just $7.99. Or rent 2 movies and get them for $3.99. Now, if that's not a reason to scream, what is? Make it a Blockbuster fright.
Let me tell you how we amplify our Latina voices. Check out Dímelo. We have it all. Deportes.
Entertainment. Noticias. ¿Qué tal? Soy Mariela Gómez y bienvenidos a Dime la Hora.
Radio and Podcasting.
Comida y cultura. Digital social media.
¿A qué equipo le vas tú? LA Galaxy or LAFC? Dímelo is the only Latina-focused media outlet at USC.
Welcome back to America's Choice. It's nearly 8:30 here in California, and we're seeing even more results beginning to trickle in.
Let's take a look at what we might have missed during the break.
New Mexico was called for Vice President Harris, bringing the electoral total for 230 for Donald Trump and 192 for Vice President Harris. Our California correspondent, Stephen Knobel, has also been tracking the key races in the Golden State. Stephen, what are the updates?
Yeah, well, polls closed a little over 30 minutes ago in California, so we've started to see some movement in the election results. Earlier, we highlighted 5 California congressional districts that are currently red, but could see a Democrat win tonight. I want to check in on District 13, where Adam Gray is ahead of the incumbent John Durate. Gray is ahead of Durate by less than 1%. Now, 26% is currently reporting. This is a 2022 rematch, where Durate won by just 0.4 of a point in 2022. Also checking in on the DA race right now, we have George Gascon and Nathan Hochman. There's no movement on that yet, but as a reminder, Hochman came into the night polling 25 points ahead of Gascon. Moving forward to our next race on the ballot tonight, we're going to look at the race for LA District City Council 14. Also, nothing reporting as of yet, but the polls have really showed a neck-and-neck race between Kevin De Leon and Isabel Jurado. This is a race all about really private comments. While De Leon's racist comments in 2022 are still fresh on many voters' minds, Jurado used the phrase "F the police" in early October during a campaign stop at Cal State LA. She received sharp criticism from police and voters alike, whose primary issue is public safety. It seems both of these recorded comments will have deep impacts on the result tonight, despite none of those results yet. Annenberg Media's Kayla Quintero. She asked voters in District 14 about the issues they care about most.
More than 300 people gathered at a Boyle Heights church for the LA City Council District 14 debate. Candidates Isabel Jurado and Kevin De Leon answered questions based on the nearly 500 responses received through a community survey. Moderator David Garcia said one of the most pressing issues has literally left residents in the dark.
The community was greatly concerned about crime and safety, the basic needs like street lamps.
For months, Boyle Heights and its surrounding neighborhoods have experienced a major outage of their streetlights. Tony Garcia says, right now, there are things that are priorities for us all. I'm talking about there being streets that are not lit at night. The area has faced a surge in copper wire thefts, with almost 7,000 reported cases of it in 2023, which De Leon's office estimated had caused $17 million in damages in that year alone. Despite the LA City Council passing an ordinance last spring that would put hundreds of thousands of dollars towards streetlight maintenance efforts, the 6th Street Bridge, otherwise known as the Ribbon of Light, has remained dark.
They feel neglected, they feel forgotten, and frankly, their city services are lacking. CD14 has the highest number of lights that are out in the city, and that's in part due to absent leadership.
While District 14 residents differed in their candidate preferences. What they're hoping to see following the November elections is the same across the board. We want our streets to be safe for our children, our community. Boyle Heights residents are voting for a brighter future. For Annenberg Media, I'm Kayla Quintero.
Now let's check in with reporter Leah Albert, who's live at the Republican Watch Party. Leah, how's the atmosphere looking over there right now?
The atmosphere is still very, very high. There is a lot of cheering behind me. People are still coming in. There are a lot of guest speakers. We have the head of the LA GOP here. We've had a lot of other pretty big guest speakers. We found out that Steve Garvey is not coming here tonight. He was supposed to. Somebody who organized the event told us that he decided to watch from his home in Palm Springs. That's what I've heard. I'm not too sure, but the energy is still very live, it's still very excited, and people are still feeling hopeful. That's what they are saying. Back to you in the studio. Thank you.
Thanks, Leah. Now we're going to go to reporter Terrence Holton, who's been on the ground in downtown. Terrence, has the energy shifted? How's it looking?
Yeah, well, guys, as you can see, the room is starting to fill up. It's a little loud. It's hard to hear. We're getting a lot of music. We're expecting that Adam Schiff is going to speak soon. As we can see, a race has been called for him in California. We're also hoping to speak with former Senator Alex Padilla, whose Schiff is taking over his seat. Now, as I mentioned, we're hoping to see him soon. We've been speaking around with people, and overall, there is an excitement in the air. Everyone is excited to see this Schiff, but there is also a nervousness. You're seeing the presidential turnouts. There's very much a nervous air, like a nervous energy, and as we're going to be seeing a speaker here in a second, so we may have to wrap things up. But overall, this is a very exciting event. Everyone is really happy about Adam Schiff. He pretty easily won his race against Steve Garvey, and overall, it's going to be a great night. We're going to continue speaking to people. However, you'll see next to us, the rooms have quieted down. They're expecting a speaker. Now, coming up, we're hoping that we'll be able to get Alex Padilla on camera soon. However, we're looking at Schiff and what he's going to say. So overall, it should be a great night. Schiff is going to hopefully rally the troops, so to say. We're hoping that he will be able to really energize this room. The music has been blaring, all sorts of that stuff. It's been great. As you can hear, it is on cue. So maybe we're not seeing Schiff yet, but people are filling it out. And the crowd has been not quiet necessarily, but definitely it's not a rambunctious crowd like you would see in maybe different states and such as that. So we're overall seeing people filling it out. People starting to get let in at around 8:05, but we're not 100% sure how many more people are going to be coming and all of that. So overall, we're looking at this. I mean, just take a look around behind us. There's lots of news crews. There's also all sorts of that stuff. Until then, we'll be speaking with people, hopefully Alex Padilla later. Until then, I'll send it back to the studio.
Thank you so much, Terrence. Well, we know the race between Adam Schiff and Garvey has just been called. We also had a notable update in control of the Senate. Democratic Ohio Senator Sherrod Brown lost a pretty decisive loss against Bernie Moreno, the Republican candidate, which is flipping that Democratic seat to the Republican seat. This is looking good for Republicans tonight, who are hoping to flip control of the Congress. And what are we seeing from the rest of the chamber and what this looks like for the future of the Democrats?
Coming in tonight, right, we knew it was 51-49 in the House. That was leaning Democratic. Only 2 seats needed to be flipped by the Republican Party. Between West Virginia with Jim Justice and now Moreno in Ohio, they've flipped those seats. So the Democrats now turn from a defensive game into an offensive game, where they need to now maybe have some seats that should have gone red go blue.
And on the notion of Democrats playing on the offensive now a little bit, Kamala Harris has just been called for Virginia, bringing her initial electoral college total to 205 compared to Donald Trump's 230.
Right, she trails now just by 25 electoral college votes. But as we have known, these swing states are still counting, and we know that we're probably not going to get results from them for at least an hour or more. Minnesota, Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, Georgia, and Arizona are still out. So we're still waiting on the rest of those electoral college votes and trying to see where those are going to go. But the night is progressing, and we're beginning to see a few more key numbers. Let's circle back to our national correspondent, Payton May, for the latest on these swing states.
Thank you so much, Sophie. While it is still too early to tell, we are seeing a few more key numbers from these battleground states. Let's take a look now to Nevada, which is reporting 0% of their vote in. This is not uncommon for Nevada. We know that in 2020, their first vote totals were not reported for about an hour until after their polls had closed. So we really will not see any decisive news out of the state with only 6 electoral college votes. Out of the last 7 election cycles, Democrats have won in the past 5, and 538 polling in the state of Arizona has had them winning in these past elections. Let's take a look specifically at Arizona, which has about 50% of their vote reported in. This is still a neck-and-neck race between the vice president and former president Donald Trump, 49% to 49%. Like we said earlier, Joe Biden narrowly won the state of Arizona in 2020, and all eyes have been on the Sunbelt state. The state was also the subject of widespread voter fraud claims and election conspiracy theories. County election officials say that they are prepared to combat election denialism this time around, but they aren't expecting to know the total vote count for days after polls closed. This race will continue to look neck and neck as we continue to get greater vote totals from Maricopa County, which is the largest county in the state. Let's head now to Pennsylvania, which has 81% of the vote reported in, a pretty significant number. Kamala Harris appears to still be trailing Donald Trump 47% to 51%. Pennsylvania is considered more likely to tip the election than any other swing state, and recent polling has had both candidates in a dead heat leading up to today. For both candidates, the path to the presidency really does run through winning Pennsylvania's 19 electoral votes. Let's go now to Michigan, which has 38% of their vote reported in. Kamala Harris is currently trailing Donald Trump in the state as well, 46% to 51%. Michigan is home to over 240,000 registered Muslim voters, many of whom helped Biden achieve the White House in 2020. As the war in Gaza continues, though, Arab and Muslim Americans in the state have expressed dissatisfaction over the vice president's stance. In an election this close, every vote will have an impact on the outcome. We also know from AP reporting that Michigan is still waiting on vote totals from Wayne and Macomb counties, which are traditional Democratic strongholds in the Detroit area. Let's take a look now at Georgia, which has 91% of their vote reported in, the most out of any of these swing states that we've seen so far. Donald Trump is leading Kamala Harris in the state of Georgia as well, 51% to 48%. While Georgia had been a Republican stronghold since the early 2000s, shifting demographics in the Atlanta suburbs have made the state more purple than deep red. Democrats are hoping that the state's large black voter population will help Harris, where Republicans are relying on new voters in these rural red counties.
Thank you, Payton. We're now going to toss to Leah over at the GOP watch party down in Long Beach. Leah, who do you have with you?
Thank you. I am here in Long Beach with Timothy O'Reilly, the chair of the LA GOP. Now, Timothy, how do you feel about the results coming in so far tonight?
Actually, they look fantastic so far. Obviously, here in Los Angeles, we're going to be a bit limited because we are so far outnumbered, even though we have 1 million Republicans within the county, largest Republican party in the entire country. But it is one of those things that nationwide we're very excited about seeing what President Trump is doing.
Thank you. And we did hear that AP called that Adam Schiff won the Senate race. How do you feel about that?
Well, that's unfortunate. Adam Schiff, certainly amongst conservatives, has one of the worst reputations for being one of the biggest, frankly, liars in the entire Congress. And so I think it's unfortunate that he's going to wind up being the person representing California. We had an excellent candidate in Steve Garvey who would have been a good man to be there. And it's sad that the Californians decided that that Schiff was the person they wanted as their senator.
Thank you. And I know you are LA-based, but do you have any feelings about some of the swing states that we are hearing about tonight?
Well, a little bit. I mean, it's obviously, anytime you get into this business, you're a little bit of a political junkie. So very excited to see how North Carolina came out. That's swung to Trump, seeing some very good results. It looks like the entire blue wall at this point is falling. So I think it's going to be a very good night for President Trump.
Well, thank you so much, Timothy. And now back to you in the studio.
Thank you, Leah. Now let's turn it to Jack Waterman in Studio A. Jack, what do you have for us?
Thanks, Malcolm. Yeah, and as you can see back behind me, that election watch party is still going on. But here in Studio A, I'm joined with two Annenberg students here. We have Isabel Smith to my left. Isabel is a master's student here at USC, getting her master's in public diplomacy. And Yana Savitsky to my right is a senior journalism major. Now, both of these students through Annenberg this year traveled across the country to key swing states to report on those elections and find out what issues mattered to voters most there. Isabel, you traveled to Arizona, correct? Mm-hmm. Talk to us just a little bit about what that experience was like.
Absolutely. In Arizona, we learned about these razor-thin margins in 2020 with Joe Biden flipping the state for the first time since Clinton in 1996. It's really fascinating seeing how close it was there back 4 years ago and how close it's looking tonight.
Yeah, and what were some of those key issues that voters really seemed to care about as the election approached?
So in Arizona, like a lot of other states this year, they have abortion on the ballot. Prop 139 deals with that. And additionally, there's women's rights, and then there's also immigration as a key issue for the southern border state.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you so much. And Yana, a little bit across the country, you were up in Michigan. Similar question. How was your experience there?
Yeah, I think we're somewhat insulated sometimes in California, but then when you travel to a swing state like Michigan, you really realize how undecided voters are. I talked to so many first-time voters that had no idea what way they were going to vote. They were telling me they were going to decide today.
I feel nervous, especially as I got closer to the election day.
Yeah, absolutely. And same question, right? Were those issues that you saw that they were most important similar to maybe some of the ones in Arizona or different topics altogether?
No, not at all. It's interesting you brought up abortion. In Michigan, it's already enshrined in the state constitution, so abortion isn't even on people's minds. It's economy. People are worried about cost of living, groceries. Similar, it's the top issue across the entire country, but in Michigan, Michigan is the heart of the auto industry, and a lot of people are facing layoffs, and a lot of people can't find jobs, and they are worried about that. And I will say as well, the strength of the uncommitted movement in Michigan was very prevalent when we were there. That's when the escalation in Lebanon happened. And Michigan is home to a huge Arab American population, largest in the country, and a huge Lebanese population. And people there weren't deciding between the top two names on the ticket. They were deciding whether they were even going to vote at all. And that's going to influence who wins the state today.
Yeah, absolutely. Incredible insights, and so awesome that we got to send both of you outside of Los Angeles to cover these very important elections, which we're still waiting on hearing how they go. So thank you both for your insights and for joining us today, and we'll send it back to y'all in the studio.
Thank you, Jack. An estimated 36.2 million Latinos are eligible to vote this election season, according to a Pew Research Center poll. That represents a major portion of the electorate, and reporter Felicia Pliego has the story.
Ranferi Sanchez has been cutting hair over 20 years. This Latino shop owner says business has been slow. He's always voted Democratic, but not this year.
The Republicans can do a better job and can afford better lifestyle for everybody.
The economy is the top issue for most Latino voters, 85%. Who do they support? According to a recent survey by Pew Research Center, a majority of Latino registered voters, 57% say they support Kamala Harris and 39% prefer Donald Trump. But how many will actually vote?
We as a community, Latinos, have the lowest voter registration and turnout rates of any race or ethnicity in the country and in the states.
More than 36 million Latinos are eligible to vote, and both sides have spent a lot of time and money trying to win their vote. Republicans have been doing damage control ever since a comedian at Trump's Madison Square rally insulted many Latinos.
There's a lot going on. I don't know if you guys know this, but there's literally a floating island of garbage in the middle of the ocean right now. Yeah. I think it's called Puerto Rico.
The Harris campaign reacted quickly, releasing this ad targeting the hundreds of thousands of Puerto Ricans in Pennsylvania, one of the critical swing states. And Puerto Rican rapper and reggae singer Bud Bunny posted a video of his support for Harris. Latinos are the largest minority group in the U.S. They could swing the election, and both candidates know it. For Anamur Media, I'm Feli Pliego.
And now let's go to Michaela Eidelberg in the Media Center. Michaela, who do you have with us now?
Thanks, Sophie. I'm here joined by our second guest here in the Media Center, and I'm joined by Liv Bowler, who is the student director of Vote SC. Liv, how are you doing today?
I'm stressed, but good. Thank you.
That's great. Well, not great. I'm also stressed, but we'll see how it goes. I just talked to our first guest about how candidates are appealing to younger voters. Do you see this trend, starting to take effect on campus or just young people across, the nation right now?
Yeah, absolutely. I think students and young people in general are getting a lot more involved in politics. I think social media is a big part of that. I don't know if you know this or noticed this, but if you follow Kamala HQ or a lot of other social media accounts that have been specifically targeting the Gen Z vote, I think we're seeing that a lot more politicians are more invested in getting the Gen Z vote. So we've just been seeing more interest overall, and it's been really exciting.
For sure. And have you seen any disparities between how Vice President Kamala Harris and former President Trump have tried to reach out? Is it more like one candidate is doing more than the other, or they're doing, an equal part in this?
Yeah, I feel like it hasn't necessarily been equal, but it's just been different. I don't know if we can really compare that in that way, just because depending on how people lean into different trends and different types of language, I think the Kamala HQ focused a lot on music, like Brat Summer, and a lot of things to do with the current trends on TikTok. And Trump HQ focused more towards young, white men in southern states, and targeting them in that way was not necessarily the way to go. So we just saw a lot of different approaches, both on social media and both not on social media, just to engage with young people overall.
I will say for me, one of the shocking things was seeing Vice President Kamala Harris and Brett associated together. That was not on my 2024 bingo card, I will say.
Kicked off her campaign, basically.
And I'll say, like, you know, we had several propositions on the California ballot. You know, vote to see, they've taken measures to, you know, educate students on the importance of voting. So when looking at a ballot for first-time voters, what advice would you give them about understanding what they're voting for?
I would say first off that, like, if it seems overwhelming, you're not alone. A lot of people find it very overwhelming, especially like when you're doing an absentee and there's like a lot more intricacies that you have to make sure you get right to get your vote to count. But take a deep breath and do your research. A lot of things that are affecting you at the local level are sometimes even more important than the national elections. And looking to more than one source, I think, is really important as well. Like, talk to your friends, talk to your family, talk to people in your community, and see how specifically these props are going to affect your day-to-day life, and the way that you should vote should be based off of that.
For sure. Well, thank you so much, Liv. And stay tuned for more panel interviews throughout tonight's election coverage. Back to you guys.
Thank you, Michaela. And coming up, we speak with the director of USC Center for Political Future and check out a local vote county center as ballots are being processed. Stay with us once more.
Presenting sheer madness, Circuit City's Midnight Madness Sale. Wednesday only till midnight, Circuit City will go raving mad with shocking reductions on hundreds of items. Wednesday only, this Sony 19-inch color TV with remote control, just $397. Save on this JVC compact disc player, just $198. Circuit City's Midnight Madness Sale. Get there by midnight before the curtain falls.
What? There's something under the bed. I heard something. There's nothing under the bed. I heard something. See, look. It's just Fluffy. He got scared by a dumb cat. I wasn't scared. I told you there was nothing under the bed.
Gosh, Burger Chef, it's Wolfburger the werewolf. Where can I get delicious burgers? Where can I get fun food? Where, oh where? At Burger Chef. Where?
And now at participating Burger Chefs, you can buy fun meals that now come on Halloween magic meal trays. There's a magic trick in each fun meal. There are 10 different magic meal tricks you can collect.
Burger Chef, you're incredible!
That sounded like a wolf! And it's getting closer!
Peekaboo!
Count Chocula! Did you hear a wolf?
It was Wolfie, howling for the 2 new marshmallows in my Count Chocula cereal. The lovely chocolatey part of this complete breakfast.
2 new marshmallows?
Yes, the new full moon and chocolate wolf marshmallows make Count Chocula a howling delight.
For a limited time, you can try the full moon and chocolate wolf marshmallows inside new shiny boxes of Count Chocula.
Welcome back to ATVN's special election coverage.
It's just after 9 p.m. in California. Polls have been closed for more than an hour, and we're still live with the latest election results. We'll now go back to Siara Carpenter, who's been monitoring our social media all night. Siara, what can you tell us about the trends that you're now seeing?
Thank you again, Sophie. So as we all know, there is a possibility that Kamala Harris could be the first female, black female, and Asian American president. However, the diversifying is not only happening in the White House, but it's also happening in Congress. However, this is being met with a lot of mixed reactions on social media. Let's go to my monitor. So we see that Maryland Senate seat stays blue with historic win by Angela Alsobrooks. However, these comments are saying, yo, guys are losing. We voted for Trump. This is all you got. Another post is saying Sarah McBride could be the first transgender person in Congress. However, a lot of these comments are misgendering her and using he, him pronouns for her, but others are fairly positive. We also see Lisa Blunt Rochester will be Delaware's first female senator, and the comments, when I saw them earlier, were fairly positive about this one. We also see that Andy Kim will be the first Korean American U.S. senator, and for the most part, these have also been positive, despite the fact that some people were making fun of him for being Asian American, and some people were saying, oh, is he from North Korea or South Korea? Overall, we can see that people are being very bigoted online because they know that they know that they're not saying it to someone's face. Overall, opinions are very split online, but we can all come to one conclusion, that tonight's race will be historic. This is Siara Carpenter at the Halo. Back to you guys in the studio.
Thank you, Siara. Now we turn to reporter Kayla Quintero, who visited a vote counting center here in LA.
I'm here at John Mack Elementary School, where voting centers like this one are scheduled to close at 8 p.m. here in Los Angeles. Now, these voting centers have been open since 7 a.m., but as you can see behind me, there are still plenty of last-minute voters entering the facility to cast their ballots. And as of today, the Associated Press reported that voters nationwide had returned over 84 million ballots. We spoke with some of the voters here today about why they thought it was important to exercise their right to vote in this election.
I feel nervous, especially as I got closer to the election day. A little bit kind of insecure and anxious and nervous about the results, but I'm still somewhat hopeful for our country.
I have a husband who is undocumented, so we're in the process. So for me, it's very important because that's my right as a citizen, that if I marry a non-citizen, he can eventually become a citizen. So it's very important to express our rights.
I feel like voting is a good way for advocating for yourself as well as the people that you love, because I have a lot of younger cousins or even nephews that, that this is going to impact them.
For Annenberg Media, I'm Kayla Quintero. Back to you in the studio.
We see, Michaela obviously at this voting center, and across the country we've seen long lines at voting centers, especially in those battleground states. I mean, I saw across social media today, Pennsylvania, Lehigh, Lafayette, lines totaling up to 7 hours, right? So college campuses have really been a place these candidates have been campaigning at. We know Trump went to UNC. We saw Kamala at both Michigan and Wisconsin. What are we seeing with these lines, especially around college campuses, and how will that young vote impact the election?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, a lot of these college campuses are centered in cities that are predominantly going for Democratic candidates, right? We're looking at Philadelphia, we're looking at Madison, Wisconsin, and especially for Kamala Harris, her path to victory really runs through these states. We've talked about the blue wall states of Michigan, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin earlier today. The most likely path to 270 for Kamala Harris currently runs through these states. Donald Trump has already taken North Carolina at 16 electoral votes. We know that Pennsylvania, which has the most electoral votes out of the remaining swing states, is really going to be decisive in figuring out who wins tonight's election. So I think, to your point, they're really trying to spend a lot of time campaigning on these college campuses, turning out those voters in these more Democratic cities to hopefully flip those 3 states for Kamala Harris in her favor.
Right. I mean, we see that voters are willing to brave these long lines. I know lines were over an hour right at the USC Village just near us, but I know even in 2020, right, people were willing to wait 7-8 hours. So we'll start to see those results coming out soon.
Well, and on college campuses, one of the interesting things is students can actually re-register into that state, right? Talking to people that you might know at these other colleges, have they re-registered their vote?
Yeah, I actually have quite a few friends that go to Wisconsin. One of my best friends, her younger sister just started there this year. And she says that all of her friends have re-registered in the state.
Right. Now let's go back to Michaela here in the media center. Michaela.
Thanks, Sophie. For those of you just tuning in, I'm coming to you live from the Wallace Annenberg Hall Media Center, and I'm joined by our third guest of the night. I'm here with Kami Akhavan, who is the managing director of the USC Dornsife Center for the Political Future. So how are you today?
Anxious like everybody else.
I can adhere to that. That's what the rest of my guests said. But just to jump right in, how important is it for Gen Z to vote? Like, how much do you think the Gen Z vote will influence the election?
Gen Z is the second largest generation in American history. There's 40 million members of Gen Z. They typically vote around 20%. The times where they didn't and they voted at a rate of 24%, they determine the outcome of the entire national election. Gen Z has tremendous political power. There's 8 million new members of Gen Z who are voting this election. It's very exciting. So the power is there, but it is underutilized. And it's underutilized in some cases for what are perceived to be very valid reasons. Young people don't believe in that political process. They think the system is rigged, the candidates are no good, and they've chosen to disengage and express themselves politically in very different ways than voting. So they'll do things like community service, they'll do things like pushing issues and advocating and protesting, but they won't vote. And if they did, it would absolutely make a huge difference in the outcome of elections.
And just speaking of voting and taking other measures, we've seen a lot of Gen Z being more interested in politics, especially for social issues. So when it comes to recent events such as the Israel-Hamas war and other international conflicts, we've seen a trend of Gen Z, like you said, abstaining from voting to make a statement, essentially. So do you think this is ineffective in this election season, or do you think it wouldn't be effective?
I think it's ineffective. This is my personal view, and the reason I think that is because when we choose not to participate in a process that depends on participation, that means other people's voices count more than ours do. So what we're doing by choosing not to participate is we're choosing to give other people a bigger platform and choosing to have their voices disproportionately overwhelm our own. And I think that's a mistake. So I would say for people who don't believe in the political process, if you don't like it, the way that our system is designed, the way you change it is through that process. And if you don't like that process, well, that's how our nation functions. So you kind of have to like it, and you have to learn how to use the tools in order to achieve the aims that we want. So I tell young people, if you don't believe in that political process, your feelings are valid. They're absolutely legitimate reasons to think that the system is rigged, that 7 or 8% of the electoral districts and the House races that are actually competitive. That means 95 or so percent are not. They're very predictable. So if you think the system is rigged, you're right. If you're disgusted by the amount of money in politics, that's absolutely fair. You're right to be disgusted about that. But what I think is not a good idea is to then cede your power to somebody else who is all too eager to take it and use it for ends that might be very contrary to your values, very contrary to the outcomes you want to see in the world.
So because the Gen Z influence, like as you said, is very important to the election outcome of this season and any other election season, do you think that candidates have a chance of regaining the trust of those who chose not to vote this season?
Yes, and you know why? It's because those young people are running for office. We have more millennial members of Congress now than we have ever had. Younger and younger people are deciding, you know what, I'm sick of this system and I want to do something about it, and they choose to run, and God bless them. Running for office is very difficult. It's time-consuming. It takes a lot of money. It takes a lot of energy. You have to be thick-skinned, resilient. It's not for everybody, but for those who choose to do it, hats off, because you are part of the solution, and they will become the leaders that we desperately, desperately need. So it is possible to earn the trust, but trust, like anything, it's gained by the drop and it's lost by the pint. So in order to gain trust, what do we have to do as people? We got to listen to each other. We need to do a much better job of that non-judgmental listening, like you exercise every day here on Annenberg, and make sure that people feel heard, because what happens, our brains get washed in the same chemicals as when they feel loved. And when you feel loved and you feel heard, you build trust. And I think young people understand that probably better than any generation.
Well, thank you so much, Mr. Akhavan. I will say all of us here hope that whatever the outcome is of this election, that our voices are heard. So back to Malcolm and Sophie in the studio.
Thanks, Michaela. It is just 10 minutes after 9, and Hawaii has been called for Kamala Harris. This is a blue majority state. It does add just 3 electoral votes for Harris, but it is 3 more, closer to 270. And we're also going to go back to our team at the GOP watch party. Leah Albert and Marco Ramirez have been in Long Beach all evening. Marco, how is the atmosphere there?
Yeah, I'm here joined by Scott McAfee, who is a Make America Laugh Again comedian. He's been cracking jokes here all night on stage right here behind me. And Scott, tell me a little bit about what you do.
Well, we actually put together a team of conservative comedians, because I think the idea was like, is there an audience for this? Is there demand for conservative right-leaning comedy? We did our first show years ago, sold it out, did another one, sold it out. Lately, over the past year, we've used conservative comedy shows as a fundraising mechanism for people running for local, statewide, and even to get some people out of prison from January 6th as well. So we use them for fundraisers, but it's also a lot of fun. It's been bringing people together and just having a good time.
And what brought you out here today to the Trump Watch Party?
You know, they actually asked me to come out and MC, and I guess I just wanted to be around some like-minded people, whether we win or whether we lose. And it's not over yet by any means. It's not over yet, but it's just we share this kind of a concern for our country and the direction it's going. So that's kind of why we're here.
Yeah, and as a comedian in the political space, I wanted to touch base and ask you about a recent Trump rally where comedian Tony Hinchcliffe made a comment saying, quote, Puerto Rico is an island of garbage. Yes. I wanted to ask you, as a comedian in the political world, what do you make of that comment?
That's a good question, because that really is a very politically incorrect comment, but I think that's also what we need more of. I mean, it was a joke after all, so can't we take jokes? Can't we make fun of one another and be serious? You could argue that maybe that wasn't the appropriate place for a joke like that, but I would defend that comedian to make the jokes. And I've heard some absolutely horrific, in my opinion, humor on the left geared towards our candidates, calling President Trump's daughter the C word, things like that. But yet I wouldn't censor that person. I don't want to take them off the stage. I don't want to deny them from a job or employment for crossing a line, because I think that's the biggest problem with comedy right now, is that it's kind of stifled, it's kind of boring, it's not very politically incorrect, and just kind of dull. And that's what we kind of want to go against.
Thank you for your time. We really appreciate it.
Pleasure, son. Thank you.
Back to you guys in the studio.
Thanks, Marco. Now we're going to head to our other watch party just a few miles away in downtown with Daniela Lake and Terrence Holton. Daniela, how are things over there?
Beautiful, diverse, and generous state.
Yeah, so the room is filling up. There are a whole lot of people here. And right now we're hearing from Adam Schiff, who the race was just called for him for California Senate. Right here I'm joined by Christian Figueroa, who is 19 years old. Christian, how did it feel to vote today? This was your first election.
Yeah, I mean, just quite a remarkable moment, being able to participate in history, being able to see it. I've been an activist since I was 13, so kind of seeing everything, you know, the accumulation of so many years of being involved in my community in Southern California and Northern California, and finally able to cast my ballot for our own Kamala Harris was quite just, it was very, very touching for me. I mean, I really, I was just really amazed to be able to finally do it. And I think, you know, obviously the campaign over the past few months has been quite unprecedented, but I think going from the Democratic National Convention, which I was really happy to be a delegate at, to now here on election night, I think it's just we're seeing an accumulation of so much organizing across the entire country, and of course in our great state of California. So it was a really proud moment. I really enjoyed it.
And so you've mentioned that you've been politically active for several years now. What are some of the issues that are really important to you in this election?
Yeah, I mean, this election, it's so critical, you know, not only in protecting our democracy, and I'm a history major, so democracy is very important to me, like it is for so many Americans. And I think seeing the rhetoric on the other side with Donald Trump, with his allies, you know, the rhetoric in Project 2025 and just the threat of our democracy, I think is one of the biggest issues to me. Aside from that, also a more personal issue is LGBTQ rights and same-sex marriage. And I really am concerned with potential, you know, with Donald Trump, his leadership, what he did in his first term and what he has hinted at doing. You know, it would be, I think to me, you know, it is frightening. And so those two issues are very, very important to me as a student too. A lot of the issues that resonate with young people across our entire country.
Yeah, well, thank you so much, Christian. You heard it here. Young voters are concerned about preserving democracy, about LGBTQ rights. Do you have any final words about what this election means to you?
Well, all I will say is that, you know, the organizers across our entire country, especially the young organizers, the college students out there, I mean, we are really just we have built a coalition. And so I'm really proud to just be a small part of just everything that has taken place in this entire country, here in California, especially on college campuses. So, I mean, just what a time to be alive and what a time to experience. And, you know, I can't wait to call our own Kamala Harris, Madam President.
And yeah, there's signs here tonight all saying Kamala Harris for President, daughter of California. So people here like Christian are excited to see where things go tonight and are hoping that Kamala Harris will become president. I'm Daniela Lake for Annenberg Media. Back to you in the studio.
Here's something you may not know about. Voting can actually get you into a concert. Daniela Lake shows us how this works.
You know that I voted sticker you get with your ballot? It can actually get you into a concert. By simply showing a selfie of you outside your polling place or with your unmarked ballot, you can get into a concert through the nonprofit I Voted Concerts. When USC student Angelica Mora heard about I Voted Concerts, she immediately wanted to get involved.
It was just like this perfect niche of the music industry world that was like nonprofit, nonpartisan, and was like for a good purpose. So it made me feel like it was something I could get behind.
Using concerts to increase voter turnout is just one of the ways people are leveraging the power of music for civic engagement. One of the professors here at USC's Thornton School of Music has been combining music, activism, and philanthropy for his entire career.
Back in the day, we used to throw concerts, but that was with like the Red Hot Chili Peppers and Fishbone and these LA bands. We were always doing something, and we put on the first Rock the Vote concert.
They're here because they care about their country and they want to win this election. The Red Hot Chili Peppers!
Professor Lineman trusts that Gen Z will get out there and vote, whether that be on their own or through the nudge of organizations like I Voted Concerts. For Annenberg Media, I'm Daniela Lake.
California voters had a voice in a lot of important races and issues this election. Stephen Noble, at this point in the night, what do we know about the results of these races?
Thanks, Malcolm. The time is 9:18. That means it's been an hour and 18 minutes since polls closed in California. Let's check back in with our California House races. Earlier, we talked about District 13, where Republican John Duarte and Democrat Adam Gray face off. Gray has now increased his lead. Earlier, it was less than 1%. Now he's winning by 3%, 38% reporting in this district right now. There's also District number 45. Republican and incumbent Michelle Steele is running against Derek Tran. This is the historically red Orange County area. Tran right now leading by 2.6% as he tries to follow in the footsteps of Katie Porter, who flipped this district blue in 2020. 47% of the votes have been counted in that race. Transitioning over to our propositions, it's been a bit since we've taken a look at those props on this year's California ballot. Let's check in with where they are at. Prop 3, that will remove language that prohibits same-sex marriage in the state constitution. So far, we're seeing 62% yes and 37% no, with 40% reporting. If this is approved, where it's trending right now, the state constitution here in California will define marriage as a fundamental right, no matter sex or race. Prop 4, that would approve $10 billion in bonds for climate projects across the state. Right now, we're seeing 57% yes and 42% no, with 40% reporting. We now move forward. We're going to take a look at Prop 32. That's going to authorize $10 billion. That's going to increase the minimum wage from $16 to $18. That would make California have the highest statewide minimum wage. We're seeing 49% yes, 51% no. So far, our closest rates when it comes to the propositions, 40% reporting. And the results so far with Proposition 33, that would expand local government's authority to enact rent controls, 40% yes, 59% no, 40% reporting. And that's what we have right now with our propositions. It's a close race with the props and continues to heat up throughout the night. But I think it's those 5 California House races that are really interesting. Across California, there are 19 districts that, after all the redistricting measures that happened, have been recounted, retotaled, that Biden would have won over Trump in 2020. 5 of those districts, well, they're the 5 we're looking at tonight.
Now, we really wanted to zero in on District 13 and District 45. In both those situations, Adam Gray and Derek Tran, respectively, are leading by 3%, beating out the former Republican incumbent in both those districts. What are we kind of seeing? Even though both these races are neck and neck, how can this shape the electorate going forward?
Well, let's start with that District 45, right? This is where Ronald Reagan says, Orange County, where good Republicans go to die. It is so historically red. The fact that Katie Porter was able to flip it in 2020 was pretty infamous. And now we see Derek Tran trying to bring it back to blue. And that could be great for the Democrats as they try to take over the House in this election. We just saw the Senate earlier is officially now Republican controlled. So that's a district they really want.
Right. I mean, we have seen Michelle Porter has really appealed to those Republican ideologies, right? She was the only Republican elected official, actually the only elected official in all of LA County to meet Trump at LAX in 2018, right? That's not insignificant. She really appeals to that voter bloc. But going back to District 13, where John Duarte is running for re-election, that is a district that's quite interesting because the last time that was red was 1974, and Duarte was actually able to flip flip that, but now Adam Gray is looking to take that back from him. Take us a little bit through that race. How do we get a Republican there, and what are they appealing on?
Well, Duarte focuses on really affordable living, and this is the San Joaquin Valley, so it's an area for agriculture, and he's really tried to hit home having adequate water supply. Gray, on the other hand, he's just trying to say, hey, look, I've been in the California State Assembly since 2012. I have a lot of legislative work under my belt, and let me have that carry me. Let my track record be the proof that I should serve you in your district.
Thank you.
And that's right. Thank you very much, Stephen. As we're going to move forward throughout the night, we're going to move over to our national correspondent, Payton, and start to get a little bit better of a picture of what's going to happen as we move on.
That's right, Malcolm. We are absolutely starting to get a clearer picture of the night. While most of these swing states are still too close to call, we are seeing more numbers. Let's start with our looking at Pennsylvania right now, which has 84% of the vote that has been reported in. Kamala Harris is still trailing Donald Trump by 3 percentage points, 48% to 51%. But we are seeing reporting from the AP that we are still waiting on a lot of these cities, specifically Philadelphia County, where a lot of expected Democratic voters are expected to vote in favor of Kamala Harris. Both candidates and their running mates have held 16 events across the state of Pennsylvania within the past 2 weeks, including last night in Pittsburgh, Philadelphia, and Reading in Pennsylvania. So both candidates really do understand that their path to victory runs through Pennsylvania's 19 electoral votes. Let's take a look now at Michigan, where we are seeing 49% of the vote reported in. Kamala Harris continues to trail Donald Trump by 6 percentage points now, 46% to 52%. Trump held his final campaign rally in the city of Grand Rapids in Michigan last night. It was the same city that he closed out his 2 previous presidential elections in. Harris made her final stop in the state at Michigan State University on Sunday. It was her first rally since becoming a candidate where she didn't mention former President Donald Trump's name. Final polling by the New York Times had Harris leading by just 1 point in the state within the margin of error. Finally, rounding out our blue wall states is Wisconsin, which is a traditionally blue-collar, heavily white, and rural state. With 76% of the vote reported in, Donald Trump appears to still be leading Harris 51% to 47%. We've talked about this earlier. Harris's clearest path to the presidency includes winning Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania, which have historically voted the same way for Democrats in 7 of the last 8 elections. Complete voting totals from Wisconsin and Pennsylvania may take longer than other battleground states, as election laws prohibit officials from counting absentee ballots until the morning of Election Day. So we won't see final vote totals from the state of Wisconsin until probably tomorrow, if not later. Let's go now to Arizona, where 51% of the vote has been reported in. Kamala Harris is currently narrowly trailing Donald Trump 49% to 50%. Final polls from 538 and the New York Times showed the former president narrowly increasing his lead over the vice president in recent weeks. This was the most significant polling increase that we saw out of these 7 battleground states. Trump's most likely path to victory runs through the Sunbelt states of Arizona, Nevada, Georgia, and North Carolina, which he's already won, as well as the Rust Belt states. If he wins Pennsylvania tonight, he would only need Georgia, as he's already won North Carolina, to reach exactly 270 electoral votes. Nevada has the least electoral votes of the 7 presidential battleground states, but both candidates still view it as critical to their path to the presidency. In previous years, the state has been a strong indicator of presidential results, with its winner going on to the White House in 27 of the last 30 presidential elections. 0% of the vote has been reported in thus far, but we will continue to keep you updated once votes come in from Nevada.
Thank you, Payton. It's interesting to note that Trump is at 230 electoral college votes right now, and Harris is at 210. We haven't seen many states flip for Trump in a few minutes at least, but there's still huge races to be called. Nevada, as you said, has not even begun decounting and reporting results. Arizona is still out, and those blue wall states are all still out still. What in these states are we looking to see as results are coming in? What counties in particular should we be paying attention to?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we've talked about this entire election cycle, especially this week, that we probably will not know final vote counts tonight. And we've been trying, our elected officials have been trying to tell, individuals, constituents that they shouldn't be expecting to see results. We know in 2020 when Joe Biden won the state of Pennsylvania, that race wasn't called until Saturday. People went to bed on election night not knowing who would be the president. And so while these results are looking very tight, Donald Trump is leading in a lot of these states. This can all change, right? We're waiting on absentee ballots, mail-in ballots that are able to be counted as long as they've been postmarked by Election Day. All of these votes have the potential to flip these states and really, decide victory either way for each of these candidates.
That's a very good note. Just to import that even though election night is tonight, we still have votes coming in for the next few days. And now let's go to Michaela Eidelberg in the Media Center to talk about efforts by students to get out the vote this election.
Thanks, Malcolm. Again, I'm here with our fourth guest of the night, Shao Seineker, and she is the president of USC Trojan Democrats. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm doing pretty good. So just to jump right in again, we've been talking about how the Gen Z vote is a big influence for this election and probably for future elections as well. So how well do you think college students, which are a good portion of those younger voters, understand the political issues that they were expected to vote for?
I think that college students understand the issues intimately. I think a lot of the issues that you're seeing, climate change, gun control, reproductive justice, are all things that we've had to live with, deal with, and experience firsthand. And I think that there's a lot of rhetoric from older generations that Americans who are younger don't understand political issues because we don't pay as much in taxes or have children. But I think that Gen Z has shown that they, grasp what these issues are and how they personally affect us. And so I think that they have a great grasp of what's going on politically.
For sure. And for those older generations who kind of see us in a more negative light, what would you say to them as society is changing, the world is changing? What would you say to them, as far as their opinions on younger voters?
I would say, it's easy to think that millennials and Gen Z are all 14, 15 years old, but we're growing up, we're voting adults. Most of us are over 18 now. And I think that, trusting us to have our own opinions is really important. We're growing, we're having life experiences, and I think that they should reflect as to how they felt when they were our age and how it would feel to have people constantly telling you that your opinions didn't matter, because at the end of the day, all of our votes count the same. Whether or not you're 18 or 60, your vote matters just as much. And just because, Gen Z doesn't turn out as much, we're hoping to change that. But I think that, just swaying Americans because of their age is, undemocratic. And I think that, we should show support of civic engagement from all ages, and by disincentivizing students by saying that their opinions don't matter and their voice doesn't count, you're further disincentivizing them to get engaged further down the line and creating this cycle of disengagement that you can see.
For sure. And speaking of voter turnout, how does Trojan Democrats as an organization keep students engaged in not only national elections, but also those local ones as well, which we can argue if they're as equal or even more important than the national elections?
Yes, 100%. And that's something that we totally believe at Trojan Democrats, and which is why we've done a lot of really good work with our local candidates. We've been working really closely with a state assembly candidate in our district named Sade El-Hawari, and we've been working really intimately with her campaign, doing canvassing. We've spoken with her a few times, and she's come to speak at our club. We try to emphasize to our members that at the top of the ticket, that's really important. We've done lots of things for the Harris Walz campaign, but down the ballot, it also is really important, and we emphasize that. So we try to program more in-person things for those because the candidates are much more accessible, canvassing and just having FaceTime with the candidates. Virtually impossible for us to get FaceTime with Kamala Harris or Tim Walz, but having Sade come to one of our meetings is really great for the members to see people who are just like us doing elected office or trying to get into elected office, and often it creates them it creates opportunities for them to be inspired to get involved themselves.
And now kind of switching over to a different topic for my last question, I'm going to say, no matter the outcome tonight, we've seen both of the candidates use their platforms to reach those younger voters. How do you see them, after polls are now closed, how do you see them using their socials to maintain the support and even, for lack of better words, hype up their followers?
I think that politics in the digital age is so new for everybody. And so I think that, you'll see an increase of followers and increase of campaigns using social media and elected officials using social media. I think it's difficult for elected officials because they can't use things like TikTok on their phones, and that is one of the most predominantly used social media apps. But I think that they're recognizing this growing importance of use of social media platforms to communicate with voters, because it's more affordable than buying ads, and it's more affordable than buying mailers or things, and it's more effective at reaching Gen Z voters. So as the electorate becomes increasingly more Gen Z, and as Gen Z becomes increasingly more civically engaged, I think that we will see this reliance on social media to reach these voters. And I think that we will continue to see this throughout the term. Whoever is president, I think they will utilize social media to reach younger voters and also to stay popular and relevant in what is such a fast media market. I think that social media and trends and pop culture can really permeate the news cycle. And so I think that you'll see a lot of utilization from whoever wins the office.
For sure. Thank you so much, Sal, for joining me today. And I will say those social media platform outreach abilities really did get me, because as you can see, I did vote. So back to you guys in the studio.
Really interesting insight. Thank you, Michaela, and thank you for sticking with us. Coming up, we'll have updates on votes here in California and across the country, plus voices from more students here on campus. Don't go away.
They come screaming across the sky. It's lots and lots of jets and planes. The greatest collection of aviation DVDs we've ever offered. And through this special TV offer, you can get 2 DVDs for the price of 1. You'll get to see big planes, little planes, soaring stunt and passenger planes, even planes that fly real low. Old planes, new planes, fast planes, slow planes, smoking planes, even planes at supersonic speeds. Plus much, much more when you order lots and lots of jets and planes. Each DVD is jam-packed with lots of high-flying, close-up action. This special TV offer is not available in stores. Remember, you can get 2 DVDs, over 2 hours of non-stop aviation action for the price of 1. It's lots and lots of jets and planes.
You can order now and receive a free bonus CD of jet plane songs. You must be 18 years or older to call 888-300-3455. Parents, call 888-300-3455. Satisfaction guaranteed. That's 888-300-3455 for lots of jets and planes.
If you want to stay warm and cuddly, then you need to put on a Snuggie. It's the blanket with sleeves that keeps you totally warm while your hands stay free. That's right! Perfect for men, women, and children love them too. And now there's even a Snuggie for your dog. Available in a variety of hot new colors that'll keep you cozy from head to toe and totally warm wherever you go. Snuggie is available at retail stores everywhere. So if you want to be warm and cuddly, it's time to get on your Snuggie. That's right!
That sounded like a wolf! And it's getting closer!
Peekaboo!
Count Chocula! Did you hear a wolf?
It was Wolfie, howling for the 2 new marshmallows in my Count Chocula cereal. The lovely chocolatey part of this complete breakfast.
2 new marshmallows?
Yes, the new Full Moon and Chocolate Wolf marshmallows make Count Chocula a howling delight.
For a limited time, you can try the Full Moon and Chocolate Wolf marshmallows inside new shiny boxes of Count Chocula.
Welcome back to ATVN's Election Show.
Let's take a look at the electoral map at this hour.
Now, Vice President Harris picked up 1 vote in Nebraska County, one of the 2 states that split their votes between Nebraska and Maine, putting her electoral count to 210 versus Donald Trump's 230.
This was, of course, in Democratic stronghold Omaha, the capital of Nebraska. And the rest of the state's electoral college votes still go to Donald Trump. But this does take her just 1 closer to 270.
And we're going to bring it back stateside for California voters who had quite a ballot this year. Stephen, at this point in the night, what are the results of the races that are going on around the Golden State?
Yeah, so big picture, we have a few races that have been called and others with some updated results. So let's start with the California House races. All 435 seats were up for grabs this election. So far, the Republican Party has gained 1 seat in their pursuit to control the House of Representatives, making these 5 swing districts in California even more important to the Democratic Party. Looking now at District 27, where Mike Garcia is up by less than 1%. We have 54% reporting in that district. Here's the latest in the race for the Los Angeles County District Attorney. Incumbent George Gascon has 38%, with Nathan Hochman at 61%, as predicted coming into this election. Hochman was in the polls ahead by 25 points. We have 46% reporting in that. Finally, the race for city council. District 14, Kevin De Leon and Isabel Jurado. Jurado is up 55%. 35% of those votes have been counted, and this was a toss-up. We didn't know who was going to win in this election. We still don't. It's only 35% is in. We're seeing 55% Jurado, 44% for Kevin De Leon. And in the race for California U.S. Senate, we already know that the race has been called for Democrat Adam Schiff, but we just want to give you an update on what those totals are looking like. 39% of the votes have been reported. 59% of those votes have gone Adam Schiff, with 40% of those votes going to Steve Garvey. Now, I want to take a look at some of the propositions here. These are ballot measures that are on the California ballot. We've looked at a couple of them, but let's start with Prop 32, give you an update. We're trending 49% yes to 50% no. This is to increase minimum wage from $16 to $18. A very contested race here with 42% reporting. The next proposition we're going to look at here is Prop 33. This would expand local government's authority to enact rent controls. 40% have voted yes, 59% have voted no, so this is looking to not be approved, with 42% reporting. None of these proposition elections have been called so far.
We're also going to bring it back to our national correspondent for the night. Payton, what can you tell us about the notable happenings that are going on within this race?
Yeah, absolutely. So you mentioned this earlier, Malcolm, that one of Nebraska's second congressional district has gone for Kamala Harris tonight, which gives her an additional electoral vote towards 270. Although it is small, this is a Democratic stronghold in the state of Omaha for Harris, and I think they were expecting, or at least hoping, to pick up that vote in tonight's race. But looking across the swing states, these are all very close elections. We are seeing more numbers in from Georgia. They're almost at 90% of the vote reported in. So this really is looking to be a close race as we continue to watch as the night continues.
Right, it's a close race, and we're starting to feel that sentiment, at watch parties across the nation, and we'll go back to our reporter soon, but we know that at the Harris watch party, right, the AP is reporting that she's not planning to address the public tonight, so, little votes like Hawaii's or little votes like that one from Nebraska, those are really starting to weigh in on this election, and they're especially ones that are, pointing to some confidence on either side of this campaign.
Especially in a race where she's behind, every electoral vote matters. Even the more ones that seem inconsequential can be big races in the end. Like Payton brought up earlier, as election night may be tonight, but the votes will be continuing to be counted in the days and possibly in the week ahead.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're not just talking about the presidential race tonight. We talked about Bernie Moreno flipping that Senate seat from Sherrod Brown. We also saw that Deb Fischer won a re-election in Nebraska against Dan Osborne. Despite polling that had Osborne up in the state prior to Election Day, he was running as an independent. He chose not to caucus with the Democratic Party. That was really his messaging, right? He was trying to appeal to more moderate independent voters. And I think he was really hopeful that he could flip that. But the incumbent Republican Senator Deb Fischer has won re-election in that state, which has flipped control of the Senate for Republicans. So if Harris does end up the winner after tonight or whenever we know the results of Election Day, she will be coming in with a Republican-controlled Senate.
Right, we're seeing some appeals to those moderate voters or undecided voters, not just locally within California and our districts, but also across the nation in swing states. It seems like that seems to be really the key to getting those voters that we don't know which side they're going to go towards. We do have some notable numbers coming in from the AP now. As we mentioned, Harris has secured that blue dot, but we're now going to turn back to Siara Carpenter, who's been monitoring social media as we've been mentioning. Siara, have you seen anything new? What are you looking at?
Hi again, Sophie. So a trend that I'm noticing online is that a lot of Democrats and leftists are panicking, simply for the fact that Donald Trump won the first of the 7 swing states. Let's hop over to my monitor. So as we can see here, Donald Trump won North Carolina. Now, this is no longer accurate because Kamala Harris currently has 210 electoral votes. However, Donald Trump still does have that 230. In addition, we are also seeing that there was an effort to overturn Florida's 6-week abortion ban, and that did not pass. And normally for leftists and Democrats, they are in support of abortion, especially at later leaks. In addition, we are also seeing that there were bomb threats made to polling locations in 5 of the swing states. This is going to possibly delay the results of certain elections coming out in certain states because people had to evacuate and then re-enter those polling locations. We are also seeing that in Nevada, 11,000 voters need to verify their signatures for their votes to count. This is essentially meaning that the signature that they used on their ballot in the state of Nevada is not the same as the signature that is used on their driver's license. Essentially, this is saying that there's a possibility that they would have to recount or possibly shift these 11,000 votes, which means that even though Nevada, whose results have not come out yet, they might just be like totally in error for the next couple of days or so. Overall, though, what I see on Twitter from leftist and Democrat media is that they're trying to make the best of things. We see at the bottom that someone is saying that volunteering at the polls is a black job, using Donald Trump's words against him. We also see people talking about voting being a group project and overall telling people not to panic. We're also seeing even some cute stories come out where a girl told her boyfriend that she was going to break up with him if he didn't vote. So he's voting up here in this CNN story. There's also people trying to give factual evidence regarding the election, essentially saying what the big picture is and basically making sure that we don't stress out too much right now. As former President Donald Trump has the majority of the Electoral College, it still is everyone's game. And I know that we're more than likely not going to have any results tonight, but this is all I have in the halo. Back to you guys in the studio.
Thank you, Siara. Now, inflation and the economy are primary concerns for voters across the board this election, but small business owners specifically feel the effects of economic policies more than most. Annenberg Media's Enzo Luna has the story.
Fernando Carillo has been slicing and chopping at Let Fair Meat for 18 years. He says business has been slow. His shop is just north of the USC campus. People can't spend money as easily as they used to. He says, meat could be considered a necessity because it's food, but the economy has made my sales go down. A survey of small business owners found that inflation is their biggest problem, which means it's one of the biggest problems facing Kamala Harris.
Part of my plan is we will expand the tax deduction for startups to $50,000.
While prices have dropped in recent months, inflation in the Biden-Harris years is still higher than it was when Trump was president. People used to come to the store and say, "Give me 10 pounds." Now they come and count how many they are. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 people. And only buy enough for 6 people. They don't buy as much meat as before. It's different now.
Organizations like the Los Angeles Small Business Development Center help owners start, maintain, and grow their small business. They've seen how inflation has affected them.
So we're still seeing sort of the number one request of small business is access to capital. We're not seeing a lot of small business expansion, and we're also seeing those inflationary pressures. So that really slows down growth of our economy.
Kamala Harris plans to help small businesses grow by providing tax incentives. Donald Trump wants to cut taxes and government regulations and increase tariffs. Who voters trust to handle the nation's business could decide this election. For Annenberg Media, this is Enzo Luna.
Let's take it back to Leah in Long Beach. Leah, how are things over there?
Thank you, Malcolm. Back here in Long Beach, I am with Malcolm McGough, who is a former political analyst, and he is actually all the way from Adelaide, Australia. Malcolm, I saw you dancing to YMCA just a few minutes ago. How does it feel to be in the U.S. for an election? How's the energy for you tonight?
This is my second presidential election, and it's just as good as it was the first time, probably better, because I'm seeing the American people wake up to what was happening to their country. And as goes America, so goes the world. So this is a transforming moment for not only America, but the world as well.
And how do you feel about the results so far that you're seeing tonight?
Yeah, I'm certainly seeing a strong trend for Trump in several key battleground states. I'm a bit surprised that they haven't called Pennsylvania and Wisconsin at this point because they're both well over 80% counted. But I'm confident that he's going to win those 3 battleground states, including Michigan.
And you mentioned those battleground states. How do you feel about Arizona and Nevada?
Yeah, Arizona and Nevada are really, really close. I'm not quite sure what's happening with Maricopa County, but Maricopa County in Arizona is always problematic. You never know what's going to happen there.
Thank you. And I mean, what do you plan to do for the rest of the night? What do you expect?
Well, I'm not going to bed until it's all over, and so that could be another couple of hours yet. But I think they will call it tonight. That's how confident I am.
Well, thank you, Malcolm. Those are all my questions for you. I'm Leah Albert, Annenberg Media. Back to the studio.
Thank you, Leah. Now we're going to downtown Los Angeles.
Yeah,
with
well,
Terrence
guys,
and the Democratic
the
Watch
mood.
Party. Terrence, how's the energy going down there?
Yeah, well, guys, the mood here has died definitely a little bit. As you're seeing across the country, the AP has Donald Trump leading in lots of key elections, and that's clearly affected the mood of some of the people around us. We're hearing some muted cheers for a lot of people. You're hearing behind me Attorney General Rob Bonta, right as I'm saying it, is up on stage, and there is a lot of muted cues. However, until then, we'll still talk about some of the key races here. So Adam Schiff, as we mentioned earlier, has been confirmed as the senator, and he's speaking as Daniela was up. So to just kind of discuss what he talked about, he started off his thank you speech with just hyping up the Dodgers as any good LA fan would do. Then he mentioned not what he has done in the past, not his past achievements, but what he is going to do for California, what he is going to do for the people. And I think this quote really stood out to me. We are the Golden State and we get things done. That is a key thing from his statement. That is really what he emphasized. Now, also speaking, as I just mentioned, Attorney General Rob Bonta is right behind me. But before then, kicking kind of the things off at around 9 p.m., it was it was a few people such as Chair of the California Democratic Party, Rusty Hicks, and Terry Holloman, and Courtney Pugh of Campbell for Harris for President. We'll be coming later with updates from the rally. Until then, back to the studio.
Thank you, Terrence. As we've seen throughout the night, Wallace Annenberg Hall has been packed to the brim with people watching the election as results come in.
Jack Waterman is standing by in Studio A with more on the reactions of people outside.
Yeah, thanks, Malcolm and Sophie. And y'all are right. The Annenberg Forum is still packed. It has been since 7 o'clock, and I imagine it's going to be till 11 o'clock. But here in Studio A, we're joined with Gordon Stables. He is the director of the journalism school here at Annenberg. Professor Stables, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. And we get the great virtue of talking to you a little bit later into this election. A lot of the Electoral College votes have already been cast, and there's still some left up for grabs. So what's kind of your thoughts as we go down this final stretch? And maybe we have a couple more days before we find out some of these results.
Yeah, I think we're probably going to need a couple more days to get the full results, but I think the two ways that I would organize it is there was no surprise for Vice President Harris in states like North Carolina or Georgia. That became clear early on. And then from there, it seems like that former President Trump is outperforming in suburbs in northeastern and kind of central states, and that raises the question, Vice President Harris can still win if she runs the table in the blue wall states, but given her margins in New York and New Jersey, that seems increasingly challenging.
Yeah, and what might your message be to, you work with a lot of journalism students, right, who are probably staying very active and up to date with this election. What might your message be to them as this night continues on? And again, as you said, likely pushes further into the week.
I think the biggest thing is keep an open mind to understand the story in front of you. Every election is a sample of one. No election is exactly the same, even with some of the same candidates. So listen to what folks are saying about why they voted or didn't vote. Listen to what folks are thinking about they're nervous or excited about. And the other part is just take care of yourself. These are measured in days and weeks, not in hours. And we're at the beginning of this, but there's a lot more to come.
Yeah, and what a lot of people may not know about you is you have quite a lot of experience in the debate world. And I'm curious as to your thoughts on debates, I guess in general presidential elections, but specifically to this one. There hasn't been a lot of formal debates in this election, but lots of discourse around the election. So what role might debate have played in this election, and how important is it?
I mean, I think you raised a great question that we don't have as many formal debates. And for a long time, we just took them for granted. But the reality is people have debates among their friends, their families, their social media contacts about what issues are important. And we don't need candidates on a stage with a podium to do that. And I think the conversations we're having now are what's most important as a country? What are the issues that matter the most? And how are those going to be defined? So I think we're having those debates, but they're in terms of the way someone identifies an issue or the way that someone says, this is what's going to motivate me to vote or not vote. So we're having them, just not in that same routine.
Yeah, and one last question. Where might debates lead to after this election, right? Once the votes have been cast and we've found out who the next president will be, where should those debates and discourse head after the election?
Well, I think if it's moving in the direction that we're seeing is that former President Trump has a very different view of the role of government, activist in some places, retrenched in others. And I think that's where the conversation will turn in terms of what kind of tax policy should the country have, what's the future of civil rights legislation, what's the future of America's role around the world. And I think that's the piece of debate is a moment, an election is a moment, but the country will then move forward and really figure out what it wants to be going forward.
Well, Professor Stables, always a pleasure to have you in the studio. Thanks so much. And the election watch party is still going on, and so we will continue to be here in Studio A interviewing more people and hearing their thoughts. But for now, we'll throw it back to y'all in the studio.
Thanks, Jack. It's good to see that we still have folks and students out at that watch party tonight. But, looking nationwide, we know that energy at some Democratic parties is beginning to die down. At Howard University, we know that some folks were leaving Harris's watch party. But we're going to talk a little bit about some exit polls that we've been seeing, right? Throughout the weekend, we saw in Iowa, which, eventually flipped to Trump, that undecided women were actually voting more highly for Harris. We also saw earlier today in Georgia, exit polls were showing that 86% of black voters wanted Harris over Trump. Payton, you know a little bit more about exit polls that have been coming out a little bit more recently tonight. What are you seeing?
Yeah, absolutely. So in exit polling from NBC News, they're reporting that Trump is outpacing his 2020 performance, specifically among Latinos in the Blue Wall states. The most notable being in Pennsylvania, where he's performing 14 points better among Latinos. We also are seeing reporting that Harris is narrowly doing better with independent voters, but we know that this was a big push among the campaign to reach out to Latino and black voters. Typically, the campaigns have viewed these as monolithic demographics, and I think we're seeing in recent years, and especially tonight, that's not the case anymore. And so this is really contributing to Donald Trump's vote totals in these critical swing states. So we'll continue to see where the night takes us in terms of some of those different demographics.
Well, and one of the things that a lot of people thought was, women coming out to the polls, right? And we've seen women in the past two elections, in both 2016, 2020, and now 2024, women have come out in greater numbers. Now, Kamala Harris, being a woman, could be a reason that women would vote for her. There's also hot button issues right now, like abortion rights, that could flip women towards Kamala Harris. Now, me being a male, I'm not necessarily one to speak on those issues on behalf of women. So I'm curious, Payton, Sophie, what are your guys' perspectives on why some women might vote for Kamala Harris versus Trump?
Right. I mean, I think a through line that we have to understand throughout all of this is that frequently, and I think many voters understand this, they're not necessarily voting for a candidate, but in some cases just more so against one, right? Mm-hmm. And I think a lot of people are feeling that with Donald Trump, even if they don't know Harris quite as much, those issues that come to mind when you think about Donald Trump, his comments that he made about women, earlier in his election and regarding sexual harassment, as well as what he said, his kind of conflicting opinions on abortion and what he would do, leaving it to the states at some point, but earlier saying that, he wouldn't necessarily support that. I think Harris has been able to capitalize that on a little bit, but I'm curious what you're thinking.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I think about in 2022 when we had the midterm elections and there was this outpouring of support for Democratic candidates. This was after Roe v. Wade was overturned in the Dobbs decision, and we saw that women, specifically women that typically voted Democratic or even moderate, Democrats and Republicans were coming out to support the right for women to have that choice, that reproductive access. Especially this year, we have 9 states where abortion measures are on the ballot. And I think in a lot of places, Democrats were hoping that this could be where they could convince some voters and hopefully flip them from the Republican side. And pointing to that gender gap that you were talking about, I think they really were counting on these women to show out. But it really is a matter of whether that women vote will be enough to get Harris over the line.
Right, and it's something we may not know for a few hours or even a few days. But coming up on ATVN, we'll bring you the latest election results of the night and hear from other attendees at the Election Night watch party right here in Wallace-Annenberg Hall. Stay tuned.
Let me tell you how we amplify our Latina voices. Check out Dímelo. We have it all.
Deportes.
Entertainment. Noticias. ¿Qué tal? Soy Mariela Gómez y bienvenidos a Dímelo Ahora.
Radio and podcasting.
Comida y cultura. Digital social media.
¿A qué equipo le vas tú? LA Galaxy o LAFC? Dímelo is the only Latina-focused media outlet at USC. Dímelo. We have it all.
Dímelo. We have it all.
My big friend, I love the big taste of chocolate in this little Hershey's kiss.
Hershey's Kisses, the little kiss with the big taste.
This morning, Billy looked like any other boy, but as the moon rose, he turned into a werewolf. He used new Pa's Halloween makeup kits. His friends did too. Look, Mike's a vampire. Amy's a ghost. Pa's makeup is safer than masks. It never blocks vision and it's hypoallergenic too. So watch your kids turn into the creatures they really are with new Pa's Halloween makeup kits.
Presenting Sheer Madness, Circuit City's Midnight Madness Sale. Wednesday only till midnight. Circuit City will go raving mad with shocking reductions on hundreds of items. Wednesday only, this Sony 19-inch color TV with remote control, just $397. Save on this JVC compact disc player, just $198. Circuit City's Midnight Madness Sale. Get there by midnight before the curtain falls.
Welcome back to the final section of ATVN's election show.
We open with an updated look at the current electoral count with national correspondent Payton May.
Now, according to AP polls, Trump has just officially won Georgia, bringing his electorate to 246 electoral votes to Kamala Harris's 210. We'll see how this shapes up throughout the rest of the night. But with Trump gaining the last few votes that Georgia has, we're starting to see a little bit clearer of a picture of what it's looking like just for tonight.
Right, this is a huge race. Georgia has been one of the biggest swing states. It's also got some of the most electoral votes of any of them, 16. Trump has won by a margin of about 120,000 votes. Now we know that some polls earlier in the night said that it was likely for him to win this one, but now he has officially won it. We also know that there's been a lot of different voter mobilization efforts coming out in Georgia. We know that in 2020 there were so many complications with lines at vote centers, right? But now we are seeing that people are still eager to wait in those lines and get out the vote. There were a lot of efforts from Black Greek voter mobilization groups in Georgia itself, but it seems like for those that were advocating for Harris, it just wasn't enough to put her over the edge. Now, there still may be pathways for Harris to win the presidency, but currently Trump stands just 30 or 24 electoral college votes away. Payton, what can you tell us a little bit about that pathway for Harris or a pathway for Trump?
Yeah, absolutely. We've talked about this throughout the night, that the clearest path for victory for Vice President Kamala Harris is through those blue wall states of Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania. Now, with Trump adding Georgia's 16 electoral votes to his vote total. This gets him one step closer to the presidency. So some potential paths to victory for Donald Trump include North Carolina and Georgia, 2 states that he's already won, as well as Nevada, Arizona, and then just one of those Rust Belt states. If he can pick up one of those tonight, that gets him past that point of victory, or a combination of adding Pennsylvania and Arizona could also get him past that 270 line. I also wanted us to take a look at the current state of the remaining swing states of this race and see what some of these numbers are looking like as tonight continues. Let's look now to Pennsylvania, which has 90% of our vote reported in. Kamala Harris is still trailing Donald Trump 47% to 51%. According to NBC exit polls, Trump is outpacing his 2020 performance among Latinos in these 3 blue wall states, specifically in the Keystone state of Pennsylvania. He is performing 14 points better among Latinos. Let's take a look now to Georgia, which has just decisively been called by the Associated Press for Trump. Just a few moments ago, we only had 94% of the vote reported in. And a few moments ago, Trump was leading by slightly less than 100,000 votes for Harris. And so the AP has made this call deciding the state of Georgia for Donald Trump. Georgia had record-breaking early vote numbers with 4 million early votes cast. It appears that those ballots were split between Harris and Trump. And for Election Day voting, Trump actually led that total by roughly 8 percentage points. Now, for Michigan, the AP Decision Desk has estimated that Harris would need to beat Trump by about 8 points in the ballots left to be counted to catch up and take the lead. 59% of the votes have been reported in. Kamala Harris is trailing Donald Trump pretty significantly with 6% of the vote, 46% to 52%. We are still awaiting vote totals in some of those more Democratic stronghold areas of Detroit, but we may not see those numbers until tomorrow or later in the week at the latest. Now let's take a look at Arizona. Let's take a look at Wisconsin instead. We have 84% of the vote being reported in. Kamala Harris is also trailing in the swing state of Wisconsin, 47% to 51%. Now, Wisconsin is typically considered the little sister of these 3 blue wall states. It only has 10 electoral votes, but this really is the path to the presidency for Kamala Harris if she still wants to win tonight. We are still waiting on vote totals from some of those big counties, especially absentee ballots, which typically tend to lean more Democratic. But with 84% of the vote, Harris is still trailing Donald Trump by 4%. Let's take a look now at Arizona, which has about 51% of their vote reported in. Harris and Trump are tied in the state in a neck-and-neck tie, 49% to 49%. Now, if you remember earlier in tonight's show, we talked about Ruben Gallego and Kari Lake. Now, earlier, with that still 51% of the vote reported in, Ruben Gallego was doing significantly better than Kari Lake. This really demonstrates how voters are not necessarily voting Democratic down ballot, but instead choosing to split their ticket. I mentioned this earlier that I was able to visit the state of Arizona, talk to voters who are really concerned about the economy and the immigration, and we are seeing that with tonight's numbers. But like we mentioned earlier, Maricopa County, the largest county in the state of Arizona, has 2.3 million votes. They are still waiting on over 700,000 votes in Maricopa County, which typically tends to lean Democratic. Maricopa County only has about 60% of their total vote in. Now let's take a look at North Carolina, which has also decisively been called by the Associated Press decision desks tonight for Donald Trump. It is 16 electoral votes, adding to his 270 vote total. We see that Harris lost the state 47% to 51%. That is the results coming out of our swing state results for tonight. We don't expect to have any further numbers in the rest of the night, but this race is still looking neck and neck across the board. Back to you.
Thank you, Payton. Now, one group of voters is drawing large attention for their influence. Black voters, and specifically members of the Divine Nine, known for their powerful networks and commitment to community engagement. The Divine Nine is mobilizing like never before to turn out the vote and amplify black voices. Annenberg Media's Dominique Williams has more.
The question is, what do you say to somebody that says the vote don't count?
You may feel your vote doesn't count, but your money does count.
Members of the Divine Nine, a group of black sororities and fraternities, and local voters unite to discuss the election during a town hall meeting. The black vote could be crucial, especially in the battleground states of Georgia and North Carolina.
The announcement of picking Vice President Kamala Harris, we were prepared to go into a fight within the Democratic Party on a national level.
The number of eligible black voters in the United States is expected to increase to approximately 34 million this year, a 7% rise from 2020. For Vice President Kamala Harris, her supporters from the Divine Nine, which makes up more than 2 million members, are approaching politics in an entirely new way. 44,000 women Zoom call raised $1.5 million for Kamala Harris, rallying Divine Nine chapter members to get out and vote.
When we hear her speak and we talk about the new way, like we're not going back, we can't go back.
Elite black sororities and fraternities are rallying voting efforts and engaging with community members in Los Angeles with town hall meetings to provide voter education and how their influence can impact voting down the ballot, not only in the presidential, but in local government in the 2024 election.
I think this year we have so much at stake, especially in the space of health equity. There are a lot of things that are happening on a federal level that people don't understand. Who we put in the White House is going to trickle down to a local level.
The Divine Nine has a history of social action going back generations, with renewed political energy fueled by the Kamala Harris candidacy.
The thing is, the longer you live, the more you can't believe that this is what's happening.
Millions of Divine Nine members are hoping what is happening is the election of the first Black and South Asian female president of the United States. For Annenberg Media, I am Dominique Williams.
Now, we were talking about how Kamala Harris is the first candidate who's both black and South Asian. She's also a member of a Divine Nine sorority and chose to hold her election watch party today at Howard. We're seeing this shape out the race today.
Right, Harris is a member of the Alpha Kappa Alpha sorority. She's a soror, as we just mentioned, in that package, and we can tell that has made a serious impact on voters' minds, specifically black and black female voters' minds across the country. Right, we mentioned that Zoom call with 44,000 women the day that Harris announced her nomination. These sororities and these fraternities are nonprofits, so they can't officially endorse a candidate for president, but they have in turn come out and launch this huge voter mobilization efforts that's on the ground. There's so many episodes and podcasts talking about how they're actually going door to door, knocking and canvassing, trying to get these voters to come out and vote and cast a ballot for either Harris or Trump. But that's also created a serious impact among youth voters, right? Even on campus here, we've seen so many different fraternities and sororities come together in these efforts to get Gen Z, Black, Greek members registered to vote and then actually get them to cast a ballot either in California or in their home states.
Mm-hmm. One of the interesting things about Greek life on college campuses is, yes, it is about the people that are currently on those college campuses in those fraternities and sororities, but there's that legacy aspect of it. There are generations and generations of people that have been part of these Greek letter fraternity sorority organizations, and that generational pull is really strong. I mean, you even have alumni chairs in a lot of these Greek organizations, and that's going to span not just younger generations, but all throughout.
And now we're going to shift focus back to Michaela Eidelberg in the Media Center to talk about the watch party and what it was like with a forum attendee.
Thanks so much, Malcolm. We've made it to our final panelist of the night, and I'm joined by Hannes Declan, who attended the forum today. How are you? Thank you for joining me, Hannes.
Thank you so much for having me.
For sure. So, you're out there in the forum. What's the energy like? How are you feeling? How are the other attendees feeling?
Personally, I'm feeling good, but seeing the results, obviously, I could be feeling better, and I think it's kind of the same within the forum right now. I think because I've been there the whole time, I think during the beginning it was more positive, but I'm really feeling more tension right now, seeing the results and seeing the different states being called, especially now with the battleground states.
Now, you've told me you're from Belgium. How different are the politics where you're from versus, American politics? Are they more divisive? Are they more unified? What's the difference?
For sure. I think the first big difference is that within Belgium, we have much more parties that actually, have a viable chance of making it within the government, whereas here it's only a two-party system. I think that leads, there's still divisiveness, but it's much more spread around different parties rather than just, one or the other. But we have seen, especially in Belgium, also more nationalistic, more populistic, right-wing parties come more and more, which also leads to more divisiveness within that. And then also another thing about Belgium is the fact that we're largely split in our political views between Flanders and Wallonia, which are, two of our main kind of regions within Belgium.
Got it. And my last question for you is, being, an international student, you obviously can't vote in America, but if you were to vote, how would you educate yourself on like the ballots and propositions and the candidates?
Of course, if I were to do my research more and if I would actually vote here, I would definitely do research on different news sites, different, people that I know maybe personally, maybe some professors that I know of, and just people within my life and resources that I know have that information. So it's just like I said, news sites, newspapers, and stuff like that.
Well, thank you so much, Hannes, for joining me again on this late night coverage. Tossing it back to you guys in the studio.
Thank you, Michaela. Now we're going to kick it to Jack in Studio A, who's been pulling different people for the forum throughout the night. Jack, what's it looking like?
Yeah, thanks, Malcolm. We're here for our last interview here in Studio A, and I'm joined with a familiar face if you've been watching our broadcast. We're here with Siara Carpenter. Siara is, besides being our social media expert tonight, also a senior and master's student studying journalism here at USC. And Siara was also one of those students in Annenberg who traveled across the country to one of those swing states to cover the election going on there. Siara was in Nevada, specifically in Las Vegas, just a few days ago. And Siara, how was that trip? Tell me all about it, some of the highlights of going there.
So that trip was really interesting simply for the fact that our program was making sure that we were as nonpartisan as possible. I personally went to a J.D. Vance rally and I also went to a Harris rally. I talked to plenty of students and I also talked to plenty of people at polling locations as well as the Center for Reproductive Justice, as well as students on campus. And genuinely what I noticed was that it's 50-50. You couldn't judge a book by its cover. No matter who you talk to, you were going to get a different answer. And, it was just really insightful seeing that people who either did or did not hold the same ideals as me really just, speaking to me very calmly and just like really getting the word out about how they felt about this upcoming election.
Yeah, and from what you've talked about and what you've explained to me, it sounds like you spent a lot of times with people who share completely different ideals at various rallies and events. What were some of those events that you spent time at, and what was it like to just get to hear from people who think completely differently from one another?
So honestly, just as a journalist, I just want to make sure that I'm always just good at, understanding both sides. And I really just had to straighten my face and just kind of take a deep breath and see if this is really how a person is feeling, I would want to make sure that they're also feeling better in our country, But, they were presenting facts that were different than the facts that I hold near and dear to my heart. But that's just what you have to understand, is that people are going to believe different things because they were raised in different places in different ways than you. And that doesn't make one more valid or less valid. It just makes it different.
Yeah. And we're still waiting to hear those final results in Nevada. We're hearing that Trump is currently in the lead in Nevada. But what were some of those? It was 50-47 at the moment, as we're hearing. But what were some of those key issues that voters obviously have already voted on, but that they were voting on when they hit the polls this afternoon?
Yeah, so down in Nevada, the border was a very big issue, simply for the fact that Nevada is one of our more southern states, which is in contrast to, North Carolina, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, Michigan. So the border was a really big thing. However, Nevada is also currently having a housing crisis, meaning that border, housing, really just taxes and inflation were really big issues. They were also having the ballot question about abortion, so that was a super big thing down there. And just also LGBTQ rights. There were a lot of things that were on the ballot, and it was very polarizing being down there.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it's awesome to have someone like you who can speak so confidently about these issues. And thanks so much for your social media coverage today. That's all we have from Studio A here It's been awesome. Again, the watch party is still in full effect back behind me here, but we'll send it back up to the studio with Malcolm and Sophie.
Thank you, Jack and Siara. Now, Stephen's been keeping an eye on the issues that California voters have been having to think about this election. And at this point in the night, Stephen, what can you tell us about the results of these races?
Yeah, the time is currently 10:15, so we know that we've gotten a lot of updates in these races. Let's take one last look at the propositions on the ballot this year. First, let's start with Proposition 3. That will remove language that prohibits same-sex marriage in the state constitution. Right now, we're seeing a trending of 62% yes to 37% no, with 42% reporting. And right now, what we're looking at is a zombie law, Proposition 8, that was passed back in 2008, trending to be removed. That's 62% yes, and 42% of the votes have been counted. Now let's take a look at Proposition 4. This will authorize $10 billion in bonds for water and wildfire prevention. We're seeing 57% yes, 42% no, with 42% of the vote counted. Now, if this is approved, that's $10 billion in bonds, and a lot of climate activists and groups say that this will help projects that are shovel ready. Meanwhile, there are a lot of people on the other side of the coin that say and cite previous props that have been approved in previous ballots and money going to projects that were never finished. Now, as we look at Proposition 32, that will increase the minimum wage from $16 to $18. 49% say yes, with 50% no. 42% of the vote has been reported. Now, this is our closest proposition race so far. The people on the side that want the minimum wage raised, that's Joe Sandberg. He is a major investor that put this proposition together, and he believes it will help 2 million workers. On the other side of the coin, on the side that says no, well, they believe the cost of this minimum wage increase is just going to get passed off to the consumer. A lot of grocers, agriculture workers, restaurant workers, and small businesses, they're the ones actually opposing Prop 32. And finally, let's take a look at your last prop for the night, Prop 33. This would expand local government's authority to enact rent control. 40% yes, 59% no. 42% of the vote reporting. Those that want this prop to pass, well, they want that cost of living to come down. But those that oppose this say that it's just going to mean not as many properties, not as many houses are actually being built, leading to even more homelessness in the state of California. Now, in terms of the House races here, we see Democrat Will Rollins leading the race for District 41 against the incumbent Ken Calvert. This is a 2022 rematch between the candidates. Currently, Rollins is ahead by 4%. So far, 58% of those votes have been counted. So the night is still young for these congressional races. Our election results tonight have been powered by the Associated Press. To stay up to date on the California House races and all elections on the ballots across the nation, we encourage you to visit our continued coverage over on our digital platforms at Annenberg Media, USC-AnnenbergMedia.com.
Thank you, Stephen. And while we were in that last block, Harris has been called for New Hampshire, bringing her total to 214 electoral votes and Donald Trump's 247. Now we're going to move it over to our live reporters who have been in Long Beach all evening. Marco and Leah, how's it going over there?
Thank you. Yes, back here in Long Beach, the energy is kind of going in waves whenever Trump wins a new state, especially called by Fox News here, because that's what the people here are watching. The energy gets very high. There's a lot of cheering, a lot of Trump sort of trademark music like the YMCA. People are sitting around kind of more relaxed now, but of course eating chicken and waffles, drinking beer, and honestly they all seem to be having a lot of fun. Marco, what do you have to say?
Yeah, the folks here are really on the edge of their seats and their eyes are glued to the screen, as you can see right here behind me. Not one head is turned in this direction. They are waiting for the results still to come in for the rest of the states. Many hoping for their favorite candidate to win, but the conversations between the folks, some of them feel confident, some of them still waiting for the results to unfold, but that's pretty much what we have here in Long Beach, and we'll send it back to you guys in the studio.
Thanks, Leah. Now let's head down the road to Terrence and Danielle in downtown Los Angeles. What can you tell us about what's happening there?
Yeah, well, guys, as you can kind of see behind us, things are wrapping up. People are starting to leave, and the mood has definitely kind of been killed. As we mentioned before, President Trump is leading in lots of key swing states, and that has very much kind of ruined the mood here at the Democratic Democratic Watch Party. Excuse me. Now, earlier we heard from some of the people, including Senator Alex Padilla, as well as Adam Schiff, as well as Rob Bonita.
Yeah, so we heard from Attorney General Rob Bonta, and he said that he's holding his breath and that Dems aren't really where they want to be right now. We also heard from the chair of the California Democratic Party, Rusty Hicks, who said there's a long night ahead of us. Currently, Harris has 214 electoral votes. Trump has 247, according to the Associated Press. And as Terrence said, you know, the program has concluded. They're blasting music to keep the energy up, and people are sticking around and, as Rob Bonta said, holding their breath.
Yeah, well, guys, I mean, the mood is wrapping up here. The DJ is still trying to get things going, so credit to her. But overall, the thing is just wrapping up. I mean, everything is just going on. You can just look behind us. Not a lot of people. The crowd has really dispersed. Kind of just hit some highlights of some of the people we've seen. So overall, Adam Schiff was probably the biggest hype the convention, party has seen the entire night. He hyped the crowd, everyone excited about him, and there was overall a total excitement for his thing. There's a lot of mixed emotions about it, because obviously Vice President Harris is losing lots of states, but Representative Schiff clearly won, he easily won, so very mixed emotions.
Yeah, exactly, because people are excited for Schiff but are feeling unclear with Harris, and they're actually projecting CNN right now, and they were projecting it earlier in the night and now sharing that again. We got to speak with George Gascon, and we also got to speak with some young supporters, Christian Figueroa, on how they're feeling tonight. And you know, they were excited for young voters to get their voices heard, and it's unsure how young voters are feeling at this moment.
Yeah, now unfortunately Gascon also lost his race. Another unfortunate move for the Democrats. But overall, the mood seemed pretty decent about where California's directions go. Specifically in the state, the Democrats felt fortunate. They felt as if they came away with a win. Though obviously Vice President Harris is not leading in many of the swing states, Representative Schiff is very positive, and they're overall feeling good about the future of California and where the state is going. And that's really what I think a lot of people cared about. They care about what Schiff is going to do for the state of California and what they are going to do. Now.
Yeah, and so as you can hear, lots of loud music going on, and the night is done. We're
gonna send it back to the studio. Until then, back to you guys.
Long Beach and to here in the media center. We just want to say thank you all for being with us tonight. Now we're also going to take a moment to look at just our last count of the Electoral College. As we see, we have Harris at 214, Trump leading by more than 30 votes at 247. We know that there's just a few pathways, really just one for Harris. She cannot lose Pennsylvania. If she does, this race goes to Trump. But she also must take the entire blue wall, Wisconsin, Minnesota, and Michigan. If not, then she must take Nevada or Arizona. So it's looking slim, but there is just one way for her to get to the Oval Office.
Well, and even with just that one pathway to victory for Harris, right, what we may end up seeing is a House of Representatives that goes blue. Right now, the House sits at 160 Democratic seats have been won, 185 Republican seats have been won, and you need 218 for that majority in the House. Now, we know the Senate has already gone red, but the implications of even if Trump does win tonight or later in the week, as we know results might not be until later in the week, he might be coming into office with a House and a Senate that are split in terms of their majority party.
Absolutely, and I think that points to a larger message about the importance of voting down ballot, and that it isn't just the presidential election that matters, right? People are voting for their senators, they're voting for their Congress people, and so seeing that these congressional districts are so close and are so influential in the makeup of our chamber really points to the importance of voting down ballot. We've been hearing you talk about these propositions all night and how important those are for California voters. So I think it's just so great to see that voters are turning out, they are voting down ballot, and they're being engaged and active constituents across these races.
Right, and I think that calls to an important message that we've been seeing, right? That there's so many split ticket voters, but there's also so many first time voters, right? Not just in Gen Z, but people from all ages, right? I was just listening to a news report a couple days ago where there was a 47-year-old woman in Arizona. It was her first time ever voting. But as we're seeing, this might be probably the presidential race of her generation is what a lot of people are calling this, right? This is one of the most highly contested, the most highly publicized, it's the most voted in election that we have had in so many years. And that speaks to what people care about, right, in this country. For a long time, economy and immigration and abortion rights were some of the top issues that were facing this country. But as we saw today in exit polls, democracy was the biggest thing that people had on their minds. People care about the future of this country. They care about the values that we've held for just a year shy of 250 years. And we're starting to see how that's actually panning out.
And we've really noticed as a student news organization, if I'm not mistaken, this would be all of our first times voting, and we've seen plenty of students in the last few weeks get out to, whether it's vote SC or get to the polls and really make sure that their vote is being heard regardless of how they want to vote. And thank you to everyone who watched our election coverage special, from everyone at Annenberg Media. I'm Malcolm Caminero.
And I'm Sophie Sullivan. For more coverage, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications so you never miss an episode. We'll see you next time. Good night and thank you.